From zero to crisis. Police stories that nothing could have prepared them for. My husband has been a police officer for 20 years. One night he was patrolling the downtown area when he noticed a purse somebody had left behind. He opened the bag to check for ID and found a big old bit of number 2. Some lady took a big dump in her handbag and just left it behind. He'll talk about autopsies and burnt cadavers just fine, but this is the one story he'd rather forget. As a rookie, I was responding to an alarm at a restaurant that was supposed to be haunted by a woman. The first officer that arrived was an older guy that didn't do much and didn't ever get excited on the radio. As soon as he arrived, he asked for a second unit in a high-pitched tone. As I pulled in, he had his shotty out and he was leaned up over his hood. My first thought was, oh crap, someone's breaking in. When I ran up to him and asked what was up, all he said was that as he pulled up and his lights hit the building, a woman jumped off the roof and disappeared. He was clearly shaken. Me and another officer checked the building and found no evidence that somebody had been there. It made an impression on me and I never went back to the restaurant at night without another officer. Was doing a welfare check at a house for a male with self-deleting tendencies. Only person living at the house. His car was in the driveway and the house was locked up. Gathered some more info and I was told where a key was. Opened the door, announced myself and started searching the place, expecting to find a dead body. I opened a closet door and the guy was hiding in there with a rifle next to him. If he wanted me dead, I wouldn't be typing this. The guy was having some issues. I sat and we talked for about half an hour. Told me he heard me, but he didn't want to talk anymore. I got him the help he needed. Man, so many people would have just shot him on sight. The number of welfare check calls that go wrong is astounding. I'm glad you helped. You're awesome. A law professor in Australia spent 20 years as a cop before becoming a lawyer and eventually teaching. In explaining the battered wife syndrome defense to murder, he told a story of a call to a little old lady's house where she said on the phone that she had killed her husband. Before this incident, he didn't really understand why this defense existed. Why doesn't the woman just leave? Why doesn't she just go to someone else's house? Professor shows up at the door and is greeted by a little old lady saying, "Come in, would you like some tea?" He goes in and she starts putting some cakes on a tray and pouring tea. He wonders if she's all there. He asked, "So, you said that you killed your husband on the phone. Would I be able to see him?" She directs him to the living room where the old man was on a lazy boy chair, bottle in hand and a tomahawk in his skull. Meanwhile, the old lady is asking if he takes sugar or milk in his tea. The professor said at this moment he realized why the defense for battered wife exists. The drunk old guy had been whacking her for years, controlling all of the money and didn't let her have friends. She had nowhere to go even if she left him. So on this day, after saying he was going to beat her if his sports team lost, she took matters into her own hands. He said this was the moment he realized that sometimes there are situations where life doesn't make sense and people take the only way out they can see. She was arrested and booked but got no conviction as the defense was a complete defense at the time. The defense was a better defense than the one his sports team was playing, I bet.
You see words played so badly someone literally died from it.
I mean, yeah, I doubt that these things are ever so cut and dry from the very beginning. These long and horrible relationships often get this way with one party slowly cutting off the other's access to help while amping up the horribleness. Terrible. Also, there's been a few already, but this is your warning that there is a lot of stories about people who don't want to be alive anymore in this topic. You've been warned. We were looking for a guy who stole firearms from his ex and found him under a pile of clothes in a closet at a different house. Unfortunately, there were like 7 kids sleeping in the same room, so I started getting them out of there while my partner cuffs the guy who's pretending to sleep. We decided to drag him out, and I go to move the mattress to get it out of the way, and we find the stolen weapons under where the kids were sleeping. This happened in August of last year. It was about 1 or 2 in the morning when a 911 hang-up call came in, and where all that was heard was screaming and swearing. I was the closest unit, riding alone as my partner had been voluntold for another assignment that set of days. So when I got out into the area, I was initially waiting for backup. However, as I was walking up to the house, I heard several voices screaming. Rushing up to the house, the first thing I noticed was blood everywhere. The floor, the walls, the door, all covered to shoulder height. A distraught woman screamed and pointed me towards a living room. Once I get into the living room, I see a couple on the couch, both covered in red. The male had a massive laceration on one of his forearms, and the female had taken a belt and snake-wrapped it around his arm to try and stop the bleeding. Seeing how the belt was applied, I knew it wasn't going to do anything to stop the blood flow, so I pulled out my tourniquet and as I prepped it, said to the guy, "This is gonna hurt like hell, but it'll stop the bleeding." I applied the tourniquet just above the top of his bicep, and knew it was on properly when he told me his hand had started to go numb. It was at that point that I noticed a second deep gash on his tricep that went down to the bone. It took EMS about 15 minutes to get to the house, and the paramedic made it abundantly clear that had I not applied the tourniquet, the male would have bled out long before they were able to get there. In the end, turns out the guy had come home drunk and forgot his keys. He climbed up to a second-story window and punched his way into the house with near-deadly results. A woman who was trying desperately to not be alive anymore was dropped off at the hospital. Myself and my colleague were there escorting another prisoner from custody. This girl came and spoke to our prisoner. They'd never met before, but they were just making idle hospital waiting room chit-chat. The girl vanishes, not bothered. We don't know why she's there or who she is. We just assumed she'd gone somewhere else. After a while, our prisoner says, "That girl's been in the toilet a long time. Perhaps she's having a big dump." We laugh and then realize it had actually been a while. So I start banging the door. No answer. Door locked. I unscrewed the lock and she sat there, wheezing and not super responsive. My colleague goes for help and a nurse comes and unzips her jacket and she's made a ligature from a sock and she's blue and not breathing. I managed to cut it off. It was on tight. We couldn't get scissors in to cut it. And she was taken through to get checked. She was finally breathing again. My partner goes with her. I'm stood by the door with my prisoner getting air. The whole thing is stressful. This happened in the middle of a busy A&E. People are just looking at me. Next thing I know, a healthcare assistant is running out to me because this girl is now becoming violent and my partner needs help. I can't leave my prisoner and I can't leave my partner to get beat up. I choose to go for my partner. The girl is thrashing around, kicking, hitting and trying to bite. It took 3 of us to get her calm. I barely managed to get the assistant's shout out before going in. Radio signal was poor to non-existent. Luckily, the prisoner sat patiently in the waiting room while we dealt with that. They weren't cuffed and they could have run, and there was nothing we could have done to stop it. On top of all the stress that day caused, I didn't really have my oh crap moment until I was in my car on the way home, and I realized a girl had nearly died 5 feet away from me. I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for the prisoner paying attention to where their new friend went. My cousin was an EMT in Buffalo when he was backing up a SWAT insertion. As he tells it, the oh crap moment was when he realized the weapon fire he was hearing wasn't from the police. Back when I was military police, I was assigned to write up abandoned vehicles on an area on post and found a nasty one with busted out windows, no plates, and while checking it out I noticed a couple of wires running from the front to the back. I lifted something in the back and, well, those wires were connected to a bunch of enormous explosive artillery shells jerry-rigged in the boot. A lot of phone calls above my head determined that it was an unlabeled training tool that had been left just laying out in the public by some unit on post. The next day it had training spray painted on the side to keep anyone else from having the same oh crap moment. My older brother is a cop. He got a call about a self-deleting guy behind a school with a knife. He rolled up to the spot and when the guy noticed him, he immediately started hacking at himself. My brother sprints to him and tases him. Saved the guy's life. It's all on body cam. It's frickin' wild. I was a rookie cop in a small town. I was driving to check on a report of a large group of kids causing a disturbance at a school parking lot late at night. I realized I hadn't tested my PA speaker, which I planned on using to disperse the crowd. On my way to the call, slowly rolling down a residential street at 2 a.m. with my windows down, I decide to tap my PA mic a couple of times to check it. First 2 taps, I can't tell if it's working. I slow down, tap the mic several times. I definitely hear the loudspeakers that time. At that moment, I hear, "What the fridge are you doing?" I look out of my passenger window and see this old guy sitting on his porch in his underwear looking real mad. Our eyes locked. I realized I had no decent excuse for clicking my loudspeaker in a quiet neighborhood in the middle of the night, so I didn't say anything back to him and I floored it up the road. Definitely an oh crap moment at the time. Maybe different to what you're looking for, but I get tired of traditional war stories from police. It was the awkward on this encounter that was through the roof. Thank you for the break in some of the grimmer stories here. I too would not have been able to compute that situation even if I was completely in the right. Witness to autopsies. Watching the ME pull someone's testes out from the inside. Or the needle going in to get samples of eyeball fluid. Or just the sights, sounds and smells of the bone saw cutting through the skull, and the following suction sounds of the top of the head being pulled off. Or check welfare calls. Call to check on a 50-year-old lady who hadn't been seen for a few days. Get to the apartment, look through a couple of windows, after no response at the door, and at the last window I checked to try and get my bearings while looking through the half-open blinds, I realized she was there, dead in bed, eyes open. I'd seen plenty of dead bodies prior to this call, but that one gave me the heebie-jeebies. Then there was the other dead body call. died in his sleep. I'd been in the bedroom for a couple of hours making notifications and requests for remains removal. A belt slid off the treadmill and hit the treadmill belt pretty loudly. There was no reason for that belt to fall off that treadmill. Cops get PTSD too. Yeah, I've got so many stories like this. Patting down a male arrestee for a female officer. The guy was passed out at a green light. He was already cuffed. Right as I got down to his right ankle, I heard it. It sounded like a garbage disposal choking on pudding, and the guy voided his bowels right the frick there. I didn't say anything as he sat down in the back seat. The female officer went to the opposite side of the back seat to assist in buckling him in and gagged. "Oh God, what's that smell?" I said, "He just duked himself." Huh. And then there was the time I was in a community policing unit. Right as me and about 25 other community policing officers got out of a meeting, a report of a homicide came out just blocks from our station. Dispatch advised that we were looking for a red truck. A fellow officer called out that he had a red truck nearby. I was first there as he was pulling the driver out at weapon point. As we approached him and got him cuffed, I turned and saw the biggest traffic jam of cop cars I've ever seen. Later that day, I watched a traffic cam recording of the traffic stop. I lost count at 53 cop cars coming to back us up. More of a holy crap than an oh crap, I suppose. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My mate had an oh crap moment on his first weekend of solo traffic patrols. Pulled a drunk guy over and the trunk literally had 2 people in it just chilling asleep. I was a police intern, maybe about my 2nd month in. I got to ride around and help with traffic stops and basically just help the officer on duty. Fairly small town, nothing ever really happened there, mostly just drunken domestic calls. One afternoon, I was with a cop new to the force, fresh from working in prison. Great guy. Anyhow, we're running a speed check on the outskirts of town and find a guy on a motorcycle speeding with no helmet. That was illegal at the time. We hit the lights, pull over with no incident. We get out and the guy doesn't even turn around, barely answers the questions through his teeth. Back to the cruiser and we run his license. Comes back with several out-of-state warrants with Ebola attached due to an armed attack against a police officer. We both looked at each other and back at the guy on the motorcycle. Officer immediately unlatches the shotty from the center console and hands it to me. "If you know how to use that thing, use it," was all he said. Oh crap! Without notice, other officers from surrounding towns are already lining up behind us. Thank God. The guy was thankfully tired of being on the run and was ready to turn himself in. He went in without incident. A young person drowned at a local pool, so I had to tag along with the ambulances for an investigation. I got there first and saw his father holding him crying and my heart sank. I ran over there and tried to perform CPR to the best of my ability for about 10 minutes before the ambulance arrived. The kid woke up right as it pulled onto our street. I proceeded to visit him in the hospital and now he swears he wants to be a police officer. Was on a traffic stop. My sergeant came and backed me up due to having to possibly tow the vehicle. My sergeant's vehicle was behind mine and we were both in the right lane. My sergeant was sitting in his car, and I exited my car to go talk to him. As I walked closer to his car, I heard a vehicle's engine rev all the way out, but I couldn't see it. For a split second, I knew what was going to happen, and thought, oh crap, but I couldn't react fast enough. The vehicle I heard smashed into the back of my sergeant's SUV, which struck me, throwing me onto the road. The driver was completely hammered and didn't have a license. This happened last Sunday, and I have surgery in a couple of weeks for my knee, and my sergeant has a broken back. It was actually before I was sworn in, still as a cadet on the highway patrol, loading live rounds into my service weapon for the first time. Like, wow, these could kill someone. This is more of a story of how I unintentionally gave a cop a crisis moment. I had a night job managing a liquor store in a very bad neighborhood. It was a one-room affair with me behind a desk with the cash register just inside the store's entrance. I'd only had the job for about a month when a friend dropped by to shoot the breeze. After a bit, he asked me if the store owners had provided me with any kind of protection, given what a nasty neighborhood we were in. I told him, just this old double-barreled shotty that's kept under the counter here, but it's empty. With that, I reached down and picked up the shotty to show him. Unbeknownst to me, 2 armed robberies had just gone down on a fast food restaurant and another business close by within a couple of blocks, and the police were responding to the calls in full force. I heard the sirens but didn't think much of it because sirens were pretty common in that part of town. A police car swerved into the parking lot in front of the store, and the officer jumped out of his car and dashed in to check if the robbers weren't hitting my store too. The cop burst in through the front door of the store seconds after I'd picked up the weapon to show my friend. Him coming through the door as fast as he did startled me, and without thinking, I turned towards him with it in my hands, and it was inadvertently pointed at him. His weapon was holstered, and I had the drop on him. At that moment, he didn't know if I was a perp who'd just robbed the other stores or what. His face went paper white. Both of our minds were blown at the exact same time. I quickly laid down the weapon and let him know that there was no harm intended. But I'm pretty sure he's never forgotten that particular oh crap moment, and neither have I. Yeah, congratulations, you made a man's life flash before his eyes and probably made your friend crap themselves too. Like, that could have gone really poorly. I have to say it's refreshing having so many stories of good police trigger discipline today. When I was responding to a simple trespass after warning call, and upon making contact with the trespassed individual, he charged myself and my zone partner with a pair of scissors. Nothing makes you go, oh crap, more than stopping an obvious drunk, feeling like you could maybe be stopping a homicide in progress, to realizing that you know the person, and maybe you know them really well. My friend is a cop. He pulled up to a crime scene once involving a motorcycle, gets out of his car, starts walking over and sees the guy's helmet. Figures he'll be nice and bring it over to the guy. Well, as it turns out, the guy was still in the helmet. Just checked onto my shift. As I turned my patrol car on, my radio was in mid-broadcast about an accident just outside the city I work in. I voluntarily checked in en route to help out the best I could. While heading there, I was informed that it was actually closer to the next city over, but that I'd still be the first one there. I was then told it was a head-on collision. I arrived on scene about a minute later. It was in fact a head-on collision. 5 people from one vehicle weren't wearing seatbelts. All 5 were fatally injured beyond any measure. There was nothing I could do. A doctor showed up on scene shortly after me. Nothing he could do either. I watched 5 people pass in front of my eyes. One just stared at me, unblinking, as she went. I still get emotional. I went to the memorial service to pay my respects. Their father was there and didn't know who I was, or that I was the first one there, or what I saw. He was talking to another father, clearly in between denial and anger phases, about how he wished he knew what officer was on scene so he could kill him for not doing anything, and why didn't he do anything, and blaming me for these people's deaths. That was really hard to hear. I wish I was a superhero and could have used magic powers to save them. I'm sorry, guys. You deserved your lives. I should add that I've actually gone and seen a professional regarding it. That's helped a lot. Unfortunately, it was just something that will be with me forever. I'm doing pretty well overall and recently welcomed my first child into the world. Experiencing what I did just makes me love and appreciate every day I have with him even more. Worked with a guy who used to work for Long Beach Police Department. Told me a story about a call coming in that some old man had threatened his neighbor for knocking down his fence. My friend gets on scene a little late, and 2 other units had already showed up. My friend sees crazy old guy in cuffs and in the back of one of the other cars already. He thinks, okay, these guys got this, and just wants to make sure the first units are okay. He walks up to one of the cops and notices that he has this, oh crap, look on his face. Cop says to my friend, come with me, you have to see this crap. My friend follows the other officer into crazy old guy's garage through the house. His exact words when he told the story was, it was like that scene in Boondock Saints where they buy the weapons. The crazy old man apparently had been stockpiling for the last 20 years. Multiple rifles, shotties, pipe bombs, semtex, various sidearms, and the throne. A gas-powered lawnmower that had 2 M60s mounted on it. Controls for both weapons and ammo cans and ceteras on the vehicle. I'm not sure what else was on the throne. Former paramedic. Known former gang member and a seriously bad dude who was suffering from epilepsy. It was known that when he was post-ictal, after the seizure, he'd revert to his gangland days and anybody in uniform he'd just want to fight. Hey look, ambulance drivers wear uniforms. Got a call to his known address. Me and my partner are first to arrive on scene. I already had the Valium and Versed drawn up and was ready to hit him with a knock you the frick out dose. As I got to the door, his mother, a very sweet lady, was hollering, "He's coming too!" I jumped on top of him and with all my might held him down and rode him like I was on the pro bull riding rodeo tour. My partner was able to get the meds into him IM, which takes longer to work than IV, so I had to do that for the next 5 to 7 minutes until fire showed up. I was exhausted and not really wanting to get myself beat up, so I rode that bull until 5 more guys took over. I rolled off and was just done. 3 hours later, I ended up back at the hospital and he was in there. He apologized, as he always did, and said he'd never fought with anyone as tough as me. Thank God for being 40 pounds heavier and a pocket full of meds. What can a guy do that sets off your man-child alert? They will always find some way to push the blame onto others. It's never their fault. And yes, I have to agree that in general this applies to both men and women, and maybe my cat. Incredibly irresponsible, puts off things indefinitely until someone else does it for them. Probably the kind to complain that their mother or girlfriend or wife is a nag, because they have to resort to that to get them to do crap. This comment was a huge realization for me. No wonder I haven't found an acceptable way to ask him to do anything. There is no acceptable way. There really isn't. You can't force someone to be responsible. I really wish I hadn't wasted over a decade of my life with that guy. People aren't going to change if they don't want to, and he was happy being a man-child. Monster Energy logos on his back window. I've seen a couple of people recently, usually at festivals with Monster tattoos. I'm unsure if Monster are actually paying them to tattoo their logo on their arms or if they're just really that obsessed with the energy drink. When he doesn't know how to do a load of washing and refuses to try and learn. This in general. If someone refuses to try and learn a common task because they don't want to, that person has some latent narcissism that you're going to run into down the line. When they're all over a girl and then she rejects them and suddenly she's a grotesque demon, apparently. Throws a tantrum when they don't get their way, like a child screaming in a store because their mum wouldn't buy them a toy. So they never grew out of that. They only act nice because they want something in return. Everything has strings and an underwritten contract. I've known and read of a few breakups that happened because it turns out after they moved out of their parents' place, they treated their partner like they were their new mother or father. The guys who not only can't cook or clean or do basic adult domestic tasks, but they're weirdly proud of the fact to the point of bragging about it. No, I'm not impressed that you're an adult and can't manage to take care of yourself, bro. Get your crap together. After seeing some of these, it feels good that none of it describes me. Although, I do still feel like a teenager who just wants to play video games and eat junk food. The key is that even though we want to play video games, we sweep the floors, do the dishes, walk the dogs, and then play video games. Ditto from me. The narrator did kind of come to this question to see how much of a man-child he was. Turns out there's a bunch of us repressed man-children who managed to adult at least in our working and relationship lives. Mostly.
Ugh, when his mom still runs his life.
You should have added, and he's still okay with his mum running his life. I had to fight nails and teeth to get my independence from my mother and couldn't make it happen. I had to leave it all behind. I was always her little boy, forcing her unwanted attention on me when she needed emotional relief or an ego boost whilst denying my needs. Mothers, treat your kids as human beings. They're not your emotional support animals. Filthy apartment. Floors never swept or washed. Toilet smells like hell's urinal. Piles of dirty laundry. Few or no kitchen utensils. Garbage hasn't been taken out in who knows how long. Kitchen littered with Gatorade bottles and fast food or frozen meal containers. Nasty bed sheets and posters of scantily clad models or Scarface movie posters as the only decorations. My roommates dragged me down to that level over time. Putting up with other people's addictions and misuse of time is tiring. Doesn't offer to help clean up after you cook for him. Goes straight to the couch. Help? Frick that. One party cooks, the other washes up. That's like 99% of the reason I got good at cooking. When my now fiancé moved out for the first time and he expected me to come over to cook and clean for him, he learned pretty quick and is now a better cook than me. Go figure. Still holding on to a lie even after he's been caught. I'm holding the truth to his face, but he still denies it. Damn, he could have become a politician. These answers are making me feel real good about myself. Can't keep a relationship going because they're more in love with a fantasy version of the girl they were with, so whenever a problem actually comes along, instead of working through it, they get upset and bail because she wasn't who he thought she was, and doesn't actually put work into anything. I had an ex in his mid-20s who had his mum cut his toenails for him. Cut his toenails. I noped the F out, but I'm ashamed of how long it took me. Oh, here we go. I had a roommate named Fergus. He moved in with me and one other girl in August. About November, we noticed that Fergus, while using every dish in the house, had never actually washed anything. The other girl and I had been taking turns, but not talking about it since our schedules were so opposite, so we'd never realized that Fergus was such a piece of crap. But then, she went out of state for a couple of months, and I quickly told Fergus playtime was over. It was his turn to do the dishes. He had the good grace to apologize for not getting around to it, and mentioned that if he'd ever seen the sink really full, he'd of course have done some dishes, but we'd just washed his stuff before he had a chance. Okay, whatever man. I did the dishes from a small Thanksgiving dinner and then left the kitchen to Fergus. I used paper plates and cups and plastic silverware for the next month. I didn't really cook, just microwaved it. It was finals anyways. And Fergus proceeded to use dishes without washing them until every cupboard was empty and every glass, plate, bowl, cup, and fork was crusted and filthy in a pile. He clearly expected me to cave if he made a big enough mess. The other girl would have within a week. I am made of sterner stuff, however. I fully intended to wait however long it took. Christmas Eve morning, after 30 days of this bullcrap, I awake to the astonishing sound of the kitchen being cleaned. There's water running, plates clinking, dishwasher going. I walked out in amazement and found a complete stranger cleaning my kitchen. She looked up at me in somewhat unfriendly manner, and Fergus pipes up from the living room, where he's sitting motionless on his phone. "Hey, this is Mum. She came to pick me up for Christmas." I laughed. Obnoxiously. I laughed at the man-child who got his mum to drive 4 hours to do his dishes and drive him home when he was 25 years old. She defended him. "I don't see anything funny about this." Oh, this is hilarious," I said and went back to my room. She mopped the floor and then they left. After that, I basically told him he was going to pay a service or pay me to clean the kitchen once a week because he obviously couldn't be trusted with the level of responsibility you'd give a 13-year-old. His mum sent him an extra $75 a month for the rest of the lease. I had a roommate who always thought he was pulling his own weight. It was a self-perception issue. To counter this, I always cleaned my own dishes immediately and put them back in the cabinets and never filled the sink. When the sink got full, he'd get mad at me. It was pretty funny. Good guy, just lazy. One thing that bothered me though is that when he'd put bags of trash by the door instead of taking them out. Like, dude, just walk an extra 10 feet instead of leaving smelly garbage by the door. Somebody that absolutely won't prioritize and budget their money wisely. My ex-roommate was quick to spend his money on gambling, beer, and cigarettes, but always cried poor when it came time to pay rent, along with his share of the household bills, and bugged his mum like crazy to give him money every single time. His mum was apparently well off.
Okay, so there's no mention of still playing with Lego, so I think I'm safe.
I don't play. I build. If a spaceship happens to follow a logical flight plan and makes a whoosh sound on its way to the display shelf, that's not my fault. Living like a smackhead, eating like a 12-year-old, doesn't read, doesn't progress, complains endlessly, never assumes responsibility, but would say things like, "I'm such a jerk, I'm so stupid, I'm a mess." Like, yeah, okay, and what are you going to do about it, Michael? Tantrums. My ex broke up with me over the phone at 1:30 a.m. a few days before Christmas because I told him I was just going to hang out at my place that day and have a bath, do my nails and face mask, girly stuff like that. Apparently that was rude because our want for chill days away from each other should align. He was also scandalized when I said, okay, and refused to take him back. No thanks, crazy moron, I'm good. I love the stunned Pikachu face when someone finds out that you're actually fine with them leaving your life or business. Bluff called, motherfricker. Now grow up and learn to do your dishes. He will only clean what mess he makes. Oh, you made dinner. Clean the dishes you used. I'll wash my drinking glass since I filled it. Or he can't be wrong, misunderstand, misspeak, or not hear something correctly. I never said that. That's not something I'd say. Not seeing something from a different perspective, like picking your battles. A Mario Kart race is not worth throwing and destroying a controller, and say that he just felt cheated. We can't play certain games because he gets aggressive when he loses, or others are in the lead and complains up until he wins at the end. He does stuff to other people in the game that if done to him, he'd throw a tantrum over. Thinking of capricious reasons to cheat on their significant other because they can't man up to go through with a breakup. You can't really justify cheating at all, but I've heard of some really dumb freaking excuses over the years. He whines all the time. I've known him from age 37 to 60 and oh my, still just a complainer. He looked like the perfect catch on paper, but his emotional neediness and whining are a major turnoff. Tried the relationship, now trying friendship, but I just can't. For me, it would be a man who makes no effort to keep his home clean, who can't even cook the most rudimentary of meals, and who sees absolutely no problem with that. It shows a pretty marked immaturity that I don't have time to deal with. Not to mention that he'd better not even think that I'd automatically be glad to do all of this for him just because I'm a woman. And I'm not talking Martha Stewart levels of cooking and cleaning either. My place isn't spotless and I'm no gourmet chef, but I expect to see just enough to keep the health department away and maybe eat a home-cooked meal once or twice a week. Still completely dependent on the mother. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I know a guy who constantly whines about being single. He's 33. He'll crush on one girl for like 6 months without showing any sign of interest, finally work up the nerve to ask her out, get rejected and pine after her for another year or so, hoping she'll change her mind. Despite being objectively very unattractive, not having a career, relying on friends to rent him space well below market value, he'll only ever aim for girls that are like an 8 or higher. He has ridiculous criteria too. Refuses to date anyone taller than him, and he's like 5'7", or older than him, wants to marry into money, expects his future wife to be a homemaker raising their 5 to 8 kids, thinks doing the deed in anything other than missionary position with the lights off is gross. He's had girls interested in him before, girls who were definitely out of his league, and he never pursued anything because they were a couple of years older or a couple of inches taller than him. Yes, he's a complete man-child and I'm positive he'll die alone. And no, I'm not a woman, but 0 fricks given I'm not removing this comment. When the guy is in denial about calling anything you do together a date, but when you ask if what you're doing is a date or bring up the notion that it could be something other than a casual hookup, you're suddenly a psychotic stage 5 clinger who wants to get married and have a million babies on a strict timeline. Jeez, dude. I just asked if you were on a date because it wasn't clear. I wasn't asking you to frickin' marry me. Oh boy, do I have a list from you from my first serious boyfriend. His mum made his lunch every day. PB&J, peanut butter cups, and little Debbie cakes. Just sugar, basically. He wanted to go out for breakfast every Sunday, but wouldn't get out of bed until I showed up at his house to wake him. He flipped out if I didn't text him every morning before I went to class, and called him every night before I went to bed. No, he couldn't be the one to call or text me, that was my job apparently. He punched inanimate objects when he was mad. Complained that I leaked bodily fluids on his sheets because he didn't want Mummy to see them when she did his laundry. And this last one is really bizarre. He thought throwing soap at the wall when staying in a hotel was really fun and entertaining. Soap. Like in a hotel that had a TV that he was staying in for one night, not a windowless prison where he was forced to use his meager supply of toiletries to amuse himself. They're always telling you to let go of the inconsiderate things they do instead of owning up to them. Like it's not their fault they're being a jerk to you, you just need to not get so angry about it. Nothing is ever the man-child's fault, especially since he has his whole life ahead of him to grow and learn from all the faults he refuses to admit he has. The man-child has no need for future plans, he goes with the flow, and any attempt at suggestion that maybe a 30-year-old adult should at least have a vague idea of what they want to do in the next year or so of their lives is swiftly met with accusations of being controlling or pushy or uptight. When confronted with a fault that's undeniable, he lashes out at you for something you did years ago, or perhaps he just makes up something on the spot, or simply uses something positive as a negative. For instance, you just made breakfast, but because he's mad at you for pointing out something he didn't feel like acknowledging, he claims that you never make breakfast, and the fact that you did doesn't count because you never do. In fact, accusations involving definitives, such as never, are constant. You never do anything, you never clean anything, you never do what I tell you to do. You're always never doing something, and on the off chance that you do, it doesn't count because you never do it. Won't put up with unpleasant shopping trips. I know a guy that throws the biggest fit if his wife goes off their shopping list or wants to make a stop somewhere else. She'll go with him to Best Buy while he looks at video games, but when she wants to stop at Bath & Body Works right next door, he freaks out and complains the second they walk in the door about how bored he is and pouts through the whole trip. Being proud of not reading. How involved his mummy is in his life. Good relationship with mum? Keeping in touch? Family holidays? Healthy boundaries? Maybe calls for advice when cooking something complicated or what the frick to do with silk? Good. When mum stops by the house all the time, stocks his fridge, brings him meals, does laundry, buys his clothes, cleans his house and has him over for dinner 3 nights a week? Bad. Mummy is telling him who he should and shouldn't date, what jobs he should have, what he should be doing with his money, or is still holding the apron strings after, say, 21? That's the worst, but not necessarily his fault. Other red flags: refusal to learn basic adult concepts like how to cook, clean, launder, or maintain things, and claiming it's someone else's job. Constantly shifting blame, living in a house that looks like it was decorated by a 15-year-old, inability to hold a conversation about anything more serious than TV, video games, or movies. The narrator will pipe in and try to answer the valid point that there are women who behave like this. Yes, they do exist. But it is a weird social phenomenon that in my experience this behavior does tend to manifest more in us guys. Either because society caters to us a bit more, or because of traditional gender roles. Who can say? Is 25, still lives with parents and doesn't pay rent. Doesn't do his own laundry and doesn't cook for himself. Doesn't take out the trash and hardly ever cleans his room. Spends all day on Reddit and only works part-time. Oh wait, that's me. Look, I'm working on it. Throws a tantrum when a news organization writes an article critical of him and then criticizes that organization for being fake news and declares the press to be an enemy of the American people. Oh my god, I almost married one. Here, have a list. Forces himself to dislike something just because you like it. You ever seen a grown man grit or grind his teeth while playing a video game you encouraged him to try? I have. Fussy eater. Won't eat anything that isn't pizza or burgers and has zero interest in broadening his culinary horizons. I was sympathetic at first, but he aggressively refused all of my suggestions. Owns various books on get-rich-quick schemes. I know, I probably should have left them right then and there. Spontaneous vehicle purchases. He owns a classic car from high school that he refuses to part with, but never drives it, works on it, or does anything with it except keep it insured and have difficulty finding places to park it. He had this facade of being handy, but every time he'd set out to do something handy, he needed someone else there to help him. I James to come over and help me with the brakes on my car. I called my dad to help with the tile backsplash in our kitchen. Stuff like that. And then they'd just end up doing it for him. Makes fun of the things you like. Pay attention to this, seriously. A normal guy should be able to appreciate that you like things, even if they're different from the things that he likes. He outright mocked me for enjoying certain video games that weren't the kill, loot, instant gratification variety. A man appreciates and respects your choices. A child points and laughs at the things you like. Wants the house perfectly spotless, but will never do anything to get off his lazy butt to help with that. Works a part-time job and refuses to consider trying to go back to school or do really anything to get him out of the situation that isn't whining about not getting a promotion after working sorting mail for nearly 10 years. Honestly, liberal arts degree. Such entitlement. Wow. Wants a dog? Gets a dog. Does absolutely F all with taking care of or cleaning up after or training the dog. Doesn't want to have kids yet because then he'll have to share his toys. Seriously. He's not being funny when he says crap like this. He's legitimately a greedy, selfish man-baby, and you should not procreate with him. Learn from my almost mistake. Run. Buys expensive things right after you tell him not to buy those things and then expects it to just be okay. Always talks about having a ton of money coming in. Truth is, he has no money coming in, just entitlement issues up the wazoo. He wants to dazzle you with cash he doesn't actually have. Wants to become a lawyer. Has no interest in actually putting any effort into becoming a lawyer. In truth, he actually just wants to argue more and get away with saying stupid crap in front of a judge. This is not the kind of person who becomes a lawyer. Any freaking time he playfully whines about something, but I want to see X movie, not Y, but I want a new one because mine's not working properly. Stuff like that, and then playfully laughs. Pro tip, it's not fake whining to be funny, it's actual whining disguised as fake funny whining. Just stay away from any and all whining. Having his mother appear on your doorstep at random freaking times to attack you after you dump him and he kicks himself out. That was fun. Not. They were looking in my freaking windows to see if I was home. Sending endless long texts and emails after you dump him saying he's entitled to spousal support and you paying off all of his debt that he accrued without your input, even though he's left you with 2 pets and a house you can barely afford to pay on your own. That was actually fun. I forwarded everything to my family lawyer to discredit him. Really, he did it all himself. His relatives post vaguely on their Facebook about how they're happy in their marriages or whatever, and would never treat their spouses like that. Translation, man-baby has been crying to his entire family, "You're the scum of the earth, how dare you find fault in this perfect cinnamon roll?" And probably the biggest one, talks a lot about stuff he wants, never actually puts forward any effort into getting it. Never. He just expects it to magically happen without his input at all. Everything you do annoys him. Literally everything. How dare you listen to music while you cook or clean? How dare you soak potting soil in the sink for plant pots? It's so dirty even though it takes less than a minute to wipe up. How dare you get back into painting? That's money I could spend on pizza. How dare you order off the dinner menu? Never mind that I go for lunch twice a week with my friend Kyle. It's so expensive when I eat out with you maybe twice a year. If you upset his happy norm by existing, you're sure to hear some whining about it. We were together nearly 5 years. I'm sure I'll come up with more. Furiously taking notes. Just passing by, don't worry about me. One that I haven't seen mentioned yet is pickup artistry. It covers all manner of insecurity, immaturity, or lack of personal growth, by doubling down on the objectifying of women.
See, it's not so bad to get rejected by a girl if she's just one of 20 meat socks you're pursuing at a time.
They try something once, and when it doesn't immediately work for them, they wallow in self-pity rather than try again.
I can't ask out a girl, I got rejected once and it hurts too bad. I can't exercise, I ran a mile once and it didn't do anything. I tried to learn a foreign language once, but it took too long.
All actual quotes from the man-children in my life. Something I haven't seen mentioned yet is finances. Man-children typically either don't work, or if they do, they'll work part-time at a minimum wage job. They'll call in on the weekends because they want to party, and they're just too lazy to actually put in effort to work more. Unless they're rich and are used to daddy buying everything for them, they never have much money. They're always broke when it comes time to pay the rent or the electric bill, but they mysteriously always have money to buy video games or green herb. How did your parents manipulate you to make parenting easier? When I was young, my parents brought home this very fancy maple syrup from Toronto, and I fell in love with it. We used it a few times and then they told me it had run out, so we were using a normal version like Aunt Jemima's or something. Apparently, I threw a temper tantrum. From then on, I'd be a little monster if we didn't use the expensive syrup. Today, we made waffles while I was visiting home for a week, and my mum mentioned how she had just put Aunt Jemima's back into the fancy maple syrup bottle, and how I'd always say something like, "See, Mum, I can taste the difference." For 10 years, my parents have been laughing at my jerkishness. When I was a kid, we'd take long family trips to Ohio to visit my grandparents. I absolutely loved these trips. My grandparents had all sorts of cool stuff in the house, 2 big apple trees in the front yard, and they lived next to a train track. My grandpa also loved Golden Grahams. Every time my brothers and I would visit, he'd open his cupboard to reveal 4 or 5 boxes of Golden Grahams, explaining how much he loved them and that he got extra boxes just because we were visiting. I always thought it was so cool that my grandpa, who was, old, had the same favorite cereal as me. I'd always feast on cereal every time we went to visit. Of course, years after he died, I was relating this story to someone, and the obvious dawned on me. Later, I asked my mother if Grandpa even liked Golden Grahams, and she got this big smile on her face, looked a little sad, and said, "No, but he knew you did." It broke my heart. Still the story I tell when I remember him. When I was a kid, I had a pet hamster that I loved, as he'd walk up my arm and sleep on my shoulder. Fast forward to age 16, my dad and I were talking about my childhood, and he let slip, "Oh, you mean hamster 1 or hamster 2? What?" was my reaction. Turns out my dad accidentally left my hamster's cage in the sun and my hamster dehydrated. Then, to make it better, they had the cage on their bed as they were deciding what to do, and I came in, pet the dead hamster and said, "Bye, I'll see you later after school." My dad went to get a new hamster that day, and when I got back from school, he said I was ecstatic that my hamster got bigger. My mum confirmed the story. The monster juice that my mum would spray around my room to keep monsters out? That was actually just water with a large amount of my dad's cologne sprayed into it. I used to just spew out random numbers to my mum, telling to add, subtract, and multiply, and she'd in turn tell me what the final number would be. It blew my mind, and she was the damn smartest person on the planet. Then I got clever. One day I got a calculator out to make sure she had it right. She did not. I do have to wonder at what point these fun little mistruths cross over into damaging stuff for us when we're kids. I honestly think it's so hard to know where to draw the line, and even varies from child to child as well. Parenting is a minefield. My mum used to turn the clocks forward when I had sleepovers at her house. She'd run in to change the clock from 7 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. while we were distracted. This was before we had cell phones, you see. We'd be amazed at how fast time had gone. We'd stay up really late, in quotes, and then fall asleep confident in our coolness. And she actually got to go to sleep at a decent hour without making us all shut up 6 times in the middle of the night. Now that I'm older and value my sleep, I think she's a frickin' genius. When I was in kindergarten, all of my friends would go to Disney World and talk about all of the rides they went on. I was really jealous because I'd never been. My parents didn't want to pay for a plane ride from Massachusetts to Florida. Every day I'd cry and cry just begging to go. One day in the middle of the week, they just gave in and said, "Okay, we would go." I was psyched. We went on the horse that goes back and forth and we got necklaces. We also saw a lot of couches and chairs and other furniture. The next day in class, I told all of my friends that I went to Disney World yesterday. They were amazed that I only went in one day. Turns out we'd actually gone to Jordan's Furniture, and my parents told me it was Disney World. In short, my parents tricked me into thinking that Jordan's furniture was Disney World. My realization about my parents came pretty early in my life. When I was very young, I came downstairs at 4 a.m. to witness my dad, half asleep and wearing nothing but his undies, placing presents under the Christmas tree while shoving the cookies we left out for Santa into his face. His reaction? A relative of mine tells her kid that if she behaves well at school for 5 days in a row, she can have 2 days off school. The kid has no idea that's the weekend. For a good portion of my childhood, I thought we were just eating a different brand of tomato sauce. Turns out my mum had been liquefying carrots and putting them into the sauce to get us more veggies. It took me years to know that tomato sauce should not be orange. My husband's mother would always put 1% milk in the 2% jug simply because his brother swore that he didn't like 1%. The brother never knew the difference. Mom, why did the milk expire 2 years ago? This happened to a family we knew. The mum spent months slowly switching the rest of the family from whole milk to skim milk. She kept the same jug and would mix up increasing portions of skim. Finally, one day the daughter noticed the year-old expiration date, gagged and spat milk all over the kitchen, screaming that the mum was trying to kill them all. On my 21st birthday, my parents took myself and my housemates out for an early dinner, so as not to interfere with the festivities we'd planned later on. At that dinner, my dad flipped my world upside down. When I was 10 and my brother was 7, we'd taken a family trip to the Liberty Science Center, which, for those of you not in the New Jersey area, is essentially a neat multi-story playhouse full of science-related activities designed for kids. They have an IMAX theater attached that plays interesting documentaries. For a while, they had a touch tunnel where you could crawl through an extended area in complete darkness, and several demonstrations on different floors with everything from insects to the classic shattering a banana frozen with liquid nitrogen routine. To my parents' credit, they had me interested in science from a very young age, so this was a real treat for my brother and I. However, since we were still 10 and 7, we couldn't stand to be stuck in a car for more than an hour without bickering with each other. After fighting almost the entire way there, my dad laid down the law. If I hear one more word out of either of you, I'm turning the car around. A deafening silence reigned over the rest of the car ride until we were literally pulling into the parking lot when one of us, I can't remember who, said something snarky, and my dad, true to his word, turned that car around and we drove all the way home. Fast forward to this 21st birthday at dinner, the story happened to be brought up, as I tend to use it as an example of how, while my dad was really cool, he was not one to F with. My dad then revealed a life-changing secret that only he and my mother had known. They'd never intended to actually drive all the way home after the long ride. They just wanted us to get the message. However, my dad misinterpreted some of the traffic signs and ended up back on the Garden State Parkway, which has few and far between opportunities to turn around, so he just took us home. The entire thing was an accident, but they played that off as intentional for the sake of their parental authority. They did take us back the following weekend because you bet your butt we were the most behaved children on the planet for the next few days. In short, I thought my dad was a stalwart authority figure who meant every word he said, but in reality, he's just really bad at reading street signs. When I was a kid, we had a pet bird, Bart the bird, and he could talk. For years, I recalled with great fondness talking to Bart, and Bart answering back. Well, not too long ago, I asked my dad what type of bird Bart was. Surely he was some form of parrot, and I just never put it together because I'd been so young. My dad then broke the news that Bart had never talked, that he'd stand not far off in the other room or a few steps behind me and talk for the bird. I don't think I've ever felt the carpet be pulled so quickly from under my feet. You don't know how many people I've told about Bart the talking bird. Every time we went to the hairdresser, they'd mess it up. At the time, I really preferred long hair, and they'd always cut it way too short and in styles I didn't like. Eventually, I decided that all professional hairdressers were huge screw-ups who didn't listen, and I was going to take matters into my own hands. I've been cutting my own hair since I was 15. I'm 23 now and actually pretty damn good at it. Just a few months ago, I was over at their place for dinner, and my mum casually mentions that she'd always told the hairdressers to ignore what I said and cut it in a certain way. I was floored. I'd lost faith in the entire industry. I'd had crappy hair for years and years between their crappy cuts and mine before I knew what I was doing. That stuff probably changed the course of my life in some way. As a kid, my best friend used to go on and on about how he couldn't eat the generic cereals. He had to have the name brand, how he could just taste the lower quality. Well, one night we were having a sleepover, I woke up pretty early in the morning and went upstairs to use the bathroom. In the kitchen was his mum filling the Fruit Loops from a bag of the generic stuff. She saw me, smiled, and said, "Shh." I never told my friend. That's awesome, and that mum is being economical and saving herself a great deal of needless whining. However, given the smarty little crap-eating brat that I was, you can bet that I would have been rubbing my friend's face in it starting immediately. As a kid, you were a better guy than I was. When I was like 3 or 4, I got a toy telephone car that lit up and said things when you pressed the numbers for my birthday. I played with it all day, and I didn't even question the fact that my mum didn't let me take it out of the box. 3 days later, I couldn't find it anywhere, and when I asked my mum, she told me that she'd had to return it to the store because it was infested with ants. Being a kid, I didn't think much of it, and just went back to watching Sesame Street or whatever. A few years ago, I told my mum that I still remembered that story, and she told me what had really happened. My family had just come over to the States from Nepal, and we barely had any money. My dad was getting a degree at the university, working a job and paying for our bills and his tuition at the same time. So it turns out my parents couldn't actually afford any presents for my birthday, but they wanted me to at least have something to play with, even for a little while. They bought me that toy so I'd be happy, and then had to return it a few days later. Apparently my mum left the room and cried for a solid hour after I'd asked her what happened to it when I was a kid. I had to hold back my own tears when they told me. In short, I freaking love my parents.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
When I was about 5 years old, my aunt and uncle got full custody of me because my mother chose her horrible boyfriend over me. Over the next few years, I'd visit her on some weekends to see my siblings. As time went on, I saw less and less of her, until one day she just stopped coming over, stopped calling, and disappeared. No big surprise because she was a shady human being anyway. One day, during a rare moment of seeing her, she basically asked why I wasn't happy to see her. I went the F off about how she was a crappy mother for not only giving me away, but also completely abandoning me. My aunt did step in and say, well, she stopped calling and visiting because we told her to. Finding that out didn't fix anything between my mother and I, but until I was much older and realized my aunt and uncle did the best thing they could for me, I felt pretty betrayed. Wasn't really a bomb my mum dropped on me, but a bomb I unwittingly opened. I was trying to get a job at several places when I was 16. I was pretty tech-savvy at the time and genuinely thought I could get a job working a help desk for a power company, a bank, and a few other places. I started to check the mail every day to see if I'd gotten a letter, since I wasn't sure they'd send me a letter, email, or call. I got a few letters from the places I'd applied to, and I was excited to open them. They were bills of significant debt, all defaulted on. My mum had said she'd pay them back and close it. I believed her, so I dropped it. I didn't know how credit worked back then, and I didn't know what extremes my mother would go to. A few years later, several years after graduating and entering the workforce, I tried to get credit on my own and got flat denied by everyone. I got letters from collectors representing the companies that my mum had opened accounts with under my name. They said the bills were never paid on. I claimed identity theft and managed to get the responsibility shifted off myself and onto my mum after filing a police report and talking to several companies over the phones across the span of several months. All of them said that she had opened the account in my name by claiming she was my wife. In short, my mum stole my identity as a kid and claimed she was my wife. I learned to hate Mother's Day. My favorite toys would go missing. Turns out they destroyed them because they made too much noise. My stepdad claimed he never had the right size batteries for my toys. It's because your mom used them all up. My dad used to call me into the bathroom to look at his number 2. I was always shocked out of my mind. It looked like little stars and perfect circles and even dog bones. I couldn't figure out why my doo-doo always looked stupid. Turns out he was throwing dog food into the toilet and waiting for it to bloat up before calling me in. I'm glad to say I've inherited my dad's sense of humor. My mum told me she could see through walls. She always knew when I was playing and not trying to go to bed, so I believed her for years. Turns out my nightlight cast a very bright shadow on the wall, and she would use that to see if I was in bed or not. My parents would set the clock 2 hours ahead on New Year's Eve and then take my siblings and I out for dinner so we wouldn't notice, and then wind up going to bed at 10 instead of midnight. I recently found out at age 20 that the zebra my aunt purchased for her farm when I was a kid did not in fact die from being unable to handle the environment of upstate New York, rather it was trampled to death by her llamas. Don't mess with llamas. To clarify a couple of things, the original story wasn't that the zebra froze to death in a winter storm, but that it was chronically ill from the wet and cold weather and eventually succumbed to his illness. Also, I have no idea how she acquired said zebra. She had an ostrich too, and that thing was mean as hell. My mum used to hold me up to the arcade machines and let me believe that I was playing, even though it was just the demo and title sequence. I remember getting really frustrated that I'd die at the same part every single time. For years and years, my dad, a single parent, would make grilled cheese for me by toasting bread and putting cheese on it. It was cool. Years later, I discovered at one point, while my grandma was visiting, she attempted to make me a grilled cheese the normal way. Pan, butter, deliciousness. But my dad stopped her, saying, "No, then he'll know that that exists." Also, I was invited to Neverland Ranch as a kid, but my dad didn't let me go, nor did he even tell me I was invited. Lastly, I was in Cub Scouts, but only participated in local meetings, wondering why we never did campouts or anything. I just thought it was something our troop didn't do. Recently found out that there were campouts. My dad just thought they were all buttholes, so he didn't let me go. Or tell me that they existed. My childhood was unique. My first pet was a dog I named Sparky. I had him for about 2 weeks, then one day I came back from school with my dad telling me he'd run away. I looked for that dog and set up missing posters for weeks. Turns out they gave him back to the pound they adopted him from because we couldn't afford to keep him. I remember when I was a little girl, all I wanted was to see the movie Matilda. My parents wanted to just see the Nutty Professor. So they took us to see the Nutty Professor and told me that it was Matilda. I just kept waiting and waiting. It wasn't until the end of the movie that I realized my parents were jerks. I don't know who would want to go and see that solid C of an Eddie Murphy film over the pretty solid hit that Matilda was. But regardless, I think this deception probably crosses that line we talked about earlier, from white lie to just harming your child's trust. My mum, a few times when my brothers and I were young, would turn all the lights off in the house. She'd tell us to go get our sleeping bags and bring them into the living room while she put a couple of tents together. She'd then get candles and put them in a small pile and call it a fire. This little maneuver was called camping inside. We weren't allowed to watch TV or play any video games because we were camping. She read us Goosebumps stories and we played flashlight tag. It was always fun. Cut to when I was first starting out in the world, I was having financial trouble and was consoling my mother for comfort. She told me that she's been down that road and you always pull through. I asked her to explain. She said that when we were younger, sometimes she couldn't afford to pay the power bill, and that when it was apparent that it would be shut off, then she knew it was time to go indoor camping. She did that so that none of us would ever worry or think that we wouldn't be okay. That story made me smile. I love my mum. When I was 4 years old, we didn't have a car. My mum would pick me up from daycare and then we'd walk home. Whenever I said that I was too tired to walk anymore, my mum would say, "Okay, I'll give you some energy." She'd hold my hand and make a bzzz noise as if sending me energy. Then she'd ask me if I'd had enough now. I'd say yes and would keep walking. I love my mum. When I was a kid, my favorite cereal was Cap'n Crunch's Crunch Berries. If given the opportunity, I'd eat nothing else. So for years, my mother had me believing they were only available during Christmas. So about 6 years ago, I was in a store with my ex and I see them. I explained how much I loved them as a child and we should get some. Then I realized it was July. I got really excited and even regressed a little, I think. It was then gently explained to me that I'd been duped. I'm eating Captain Crunch Berries right the frick now though, so all's well that ends well, I suppose. I used to hate whole wheat bread. My parents convinced me that it was just part toasted white bread so that I'd eat it. When I was a teenager, my grandma, who was suffering from stage 4 throat cancer, decided that she wanted to air out her secrets before she died. She filled me in that my childhood cat Charlie didn't die from old age like they'd told me, but her and my parents had put him down while I was at school one day. I was distraught. Looking back though, I can understand why they did it. Oh, and she also told me that Dad was married before my mum and I have a much older half-brother. It's been a deep, dark family secret forever. My parents still don't know I know. Maybe I should have been more upset about that than the cat. 15-year-olds are frickin' lame. I'm sorry to all those 15-year-olds out there. You'll see. My mum bought me Mega Blocks and put them into an old Lego container once. Bullcrap. What a monster. I used to have a cat when I was about 3 named Sia, and I loved her. She was a Siamese-looking cat, and I had her like 2 years. When I was 5, she got really sick while I was at school, and my parents took her to the vet. After about 2 weeks of asking my parents how Sia was, she finally came home. Now, Sia's going to be a bit pale because she's sick, and she might act a bit funny. Being in the hospital is scary. That's what my parents told me. So Sia came home, and she was a lot paler than I remember, almost greyish-white. She also climbed behind the sofa, refused to come out, and hissed at anyone who went near her. She eventually calmed down, but didn't sleep in my room as per usual. She slept on the rafters in the basement instead. Turns out, I found this out about 6 months ago, my dad started up the lawnmower and Sia was somehow inside the lawnmower near the blade and, well, bad kitty times happened really quickly. They replaced Sia with one they found at the shelter, and the little moron that was me didn't notice. Oh, the ice cream truck just plays music when they're out of ice cream for the day. Don't bother going outside, sweetie. My dad once told me that fried calamari was just fried chicken to get me to eat it, assuming that I'd like it. And he could tell me afterwards, you ate squid and you liked it. Joke was on him though, it turns out I'm deathly allergic to squid. I'm also severely allergic to fish, shellfish, seaweed, and most mollusks. Basically, if it swims, it kills me, with the obvious exception of swimming mammals, though most of them are also deadly. What weird thing would you make socially acceptable if you could? Asking a potential employer what the salary for a position is before jumping through 50 hoops with the application and interview process, only to find out it pays garbage. Calling out customers for being rude. I had a job as a teller at a credit union back in college, and I'll always say the manager I had was one of the best I've ever worked with. I once had a lady who kept asking me for a new credit card and handed me her debit card. I looked on her account and said, "There is no credit card. There's a debit card, which is what this is, but that's the only card on this account. I can issue you a new one with no problem, but if you want a credit card, you'll have to fill out an application." She was adamant that what she had was in fact a credit card. No matter what I told her, she said it was a credit card and demanded a new one. At one point she said, "Are you stupid or something?" To which my manager overheard, pushed me out of the way and said, "You will not speak to him that way, and if you're going to continue behaving this way, you're going to have to leave. I won't tolerate you speaking to my employees like that." I wish more managers were like her. I'm a guy and I get a lot of flack for complimenting people's clothing. I don't think it's weird, but apparently it means I must like men. If you've got nice shoes, I'm going to say they're nice shoes. As a woman who's dating a man who's very fashion-forward and compliments things like that constantly, I highly encourage this. Compliments from women about your clothes is one thing, because we compliment everything and your dog, but from a man, it just hits different. We should destroy the thought that the customer is always right. Draping myself in velvet. Complimenting other men. Being able to sit in silence with someone without it being awkward. People shouldn't feel obligated to come up with conversation, it makes interacting stressful. I don't believe in awkward silences. Talk about something when it comes to you and conversations will always feel more real and interesting. When you're able to sit in silence with someone comfortably, I feel it shows you enjoy their company. Me and my best friend sometimes do this. We order food a lot and find a deserted place, usually the roof of some building, and we just sit there eating. Most of the time we talk, but those moments of tranquility and peace are really nice. Best friend I ever had. We still don't talk sometimes. The narrator is probably a lot of people's worst nightmare when it comes to not being able to hold silences. You know that insufferable person who'll wait less than 10 seconds into a comfortable silence before asking a question to get the conversation started again? Hi, it's me. Being able to be honest about how you feel without being bullied or belittled. Being able to just wave or say hi to people you hardly know. There's nothing worse than an awkward 5-minute catch-up chat at the store with someone I haven't seen in years. Sitting. On the floor or anywhere really. Cashiers need to be allowed to sit. The fact that most places don't let them is a load of BS. If other people are at my house having fun but I'm tired, I just want to be able to go to bed. But they can stay and have a good time. My dad doesn't say anything at all, he just disappears. Later you'll find him watching reruns of CSI Miami in his room, munching on gummy candies. He does not care. Openly talking about your finances with other people. A lot of people don't realize they're underpaid because nobody talks about wages. It's so bizarre to me that it's a taboo subject. We all rely on money in some form, let's just discuss it. I just wanted to state that finances, in my view, include things like how much debt you have, what your rent and other bills are, how much you have saved, stuff like that. I can see how there'd be negatives to discussing your salary with coworkers or family, but in my opinion, the negatives brought up that I've read from the replies don't bother me. The people who'd be offended or have expectations of me are not people that I'd end up highly valuing their opinion. If I'm doing better than a family member or friend and they need help, I'll help them. But if they're jealous, greedy, or generally not supportive, then I don't need them in my life. People in the service industry should be able to tell a customer when they're being a butthole. My old boss from when I worked retail flat out told me on my first day that so long as I wasn't being a total jerk, he'd always have my back if a customer was being a butt, and I didn't bend over backwards for them. He banned a couple of people from the store over their antics while I was there, and it blew a couple of Karen's minds when he told them to shut up and act their age, when they tried their usual screaming fest. I loved that job. I'd like to make it socially acceptable to tell employers that you're only in it for the money and it be a legitimate answer. What, am I supposed to tell employers that I've always wanted to work a part-time job and get yelled at by Karens just so I could make ends meet? Eating alone at a restaurant or a solo movie trip. I mean, sort of limited now due to the pandemic, but before COVID, when people would hear of me doing that, they said they felt terrible and how depressing it sounded. I was like, why? It's just another day for me. It doesn't feel weird or anything. It's quite nice to get away from constant chats and have a nice quiet meal while being out and about. Neutral facial expressions. People act like anything that isn't definitely a smile is some sort of insult. It's another reason to appreciate masks. What's the matter? Absolutely nothing. This is my face. Having your work ethic, not your butt-kissing skills, prioritized and appreciated, both in jobs and in school. Staying silent if you really don't have anything to say. Short naps at work. Wearing cloaks, Lord of the Rings style. Screw jackets. All of my homies wear medieval cloaks. I dig this idea. Outfits can be so boring. I want to go out dressed like the Mandalorian or something. Taking a social time out without having to smoke or occupy the bathroom. My workday is 6 to 8 hours, it's an open plan office, lunch is social, and I have at least an hour commute per day. That is at least twice my maximum social energy per day. Similarly, not being expected to socialize with coworkers during my lunch hour. I desperately need the alone time to recharge, but I'm sure people think I'm an antisocial butthole because I'll straight get up and walk out if someone comes into the kitchen while I'm there. I'll greet them quickly and be nice, but I have to get the frick out before the inevitable small talk starts or I'll lose my crap. Staying home when sick. I really hoped this pandemic would improve the mindset, but nope, people still think you're a lazy piece of crap if you stay home when you're sick. I've always genuinely gotten mad when people came to work sick. A long time ago, I was a restaurant manager, and I just didn't understand why my GM insisted that sick people come in and hack up all over the food. We were almost never truly understaffed. I moved to a corporate call support job, and I thought it would be better. Nope. People were afraid of losing their jobs, so they came in no matter what because it was expected, even when it resulted in exponentially more sick people, which led to a loss in productivity. We were a frickin' software company where every employee technically had full remote capabilities, yet it took a frickin' global pandemic to normalize working from home. Dressing however you want. Makeup, dresses, medieval cloaks, whatever you want, regardless of gender too. That'd be nice. I think people should be able to wear whatever they want as long as it covers things most people don't want to see. Just walk around in cosplay if you want to. I wish everyone felt comfortable to dress however they'd want to. Being awake late at night and sleeping all morning. I've been like this since I was a kid. Circadian rhythm is just backwards. I can't fall asleep before 3 a.m. I wish people didn't treat me like I was lazy or something. I'm a pretty productive guy. I just get my work done while you're all asleep. I do not understand people like you at all, sir or madam, but maybe if we occupy the same desk we can produce an epic amount of work from one centralized spot, because I get the vast majority of my work done before midday. 4-day work weeks. Staying completely silent in other people's company. I wish that people would stop conflating women not wearing makeup with being unprofessional. I worked in a place where a girl was told she looked unprofessional when she didn't wear makeup. Yikes. The IRS telling you how much you owe in taxes. The IRS actually wants to do this. They're blocked by lobbying from the tax accounting industry. In virtually every situation in America when you can ask, why aren't we doing this obvious thing that's obviously better, the answer is corporate lobbyists. Hell, the reason daylight savings time isn't permanent, i.e. we stopped moving the clocks back and forward, is largely due to TV lobbyists who want it to get dark early so that we sit at home watching TV. Running in public to get to places quicker. Back when I actually went to the office in the city, I remember seeing this one woman a few different times running, and not in your typical running clothes, but in a business suit during your typical rush hour times. The first time I thought she must be late to something. A few more times and I thought, wow, this lady is always late. Finally, I just decided she must just like running to or from places. Being able to take a day off because you just want to, as opposed to having to come up with an excuse. For myself in the UK, there's a bit in the leave application for details, but everyone leaves it blank. No boss cares unless it might screw up a project. Wearing nicer clothes than normal for no reason. Yes, I'm usually in jeans and a t-shirt at work. Yes, today I decided to wear a suit. No, I don't have a job interview or have to go to court. Wearing shorts at work during summer. Why wear pants when you could be more comfortable? I worked in an office where shorts were allowed but not jeans. The CEO had some kind of weird anti-denim hang-up. No jorts and no denim skirts either. I quit after 3 months for many other reasons. Not wearing a bra. I feel like everyone notices when I don't wear one in public and other women give rude looks. I just want to be comfortable. Not being always productive and not devoting one's life to making money. Yes, siestas in the middle of the workday. Please. Capes. No capes. Although I will say that Director Krennic's cape was superfly. I would also accept Doctor Strange's flying cloak if you've come to bargain. Correcting other people's kids. Not physically, but telling them to quit their bullcrap if their parents aren't doing it. Yes, and also being able to comment on parents being negligent with correcting their kids in public settings like restaurants. If your kid is throwing food around and you do nothing to stop it, I want to hold you accountable without you making a scene, please. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Walking my pig on a leash. When my dog was a puppy, we met a guy walking his pig on a leash. My dog was so confused, he just rolled over and showed it his belly. Skipping. It's more fun and energy efficient than running. I sometimes do it when I'm alone because I like the way it feels. Probably readjusting your sack. I hate it when mine gets stuck in a weird spot, but I can't move it until I get home. Talking about our mental health issues. We all face some level of depression or anxiety. Why are we lying and pretending to be happy all the time? You know that thing we all do where we're walking and suddenly realize we're going the wrong direction or need to change direction, so we stop, pull out our phones, pretend like we read something, and then start walking off in a new direction? Yeah, I'd just start randomly changing directions on the fly. Is this actually a thing? I'd just turn around. No one gives a shot what I'm doing. I'm just some random walking down the street. Why would they care if I turn around? Men should be allowed to express emotions without being seen as weak. It upsets me to see people in pain due to things that aren't their fault. Going out in more costume-style clothing. I'm not talking about overpriced Halloween store crap either. I mean being able to walk around in full Victorian-era clothing, Jedi robes, or good pirate wear. I'm tired of looking normal, damn it. Introverts being allowed to skip parties without being judged. As wonderful as that would be, I don't think that would ever kill the FOMO for some of them. Personal feelings aren't likely to change that much based on how acceptable it is to skip a party. Frilly dresses for adults. Am I the only one? I loved wearing them at Christmas and Easter as a little girl. Now, I feel like I can't get away with it. Satin, lace, pastel-covered ruffles, puffy sleeves, embroidered flowers and ribbons, a skirt that flies out when you spin around, maybe even a corset. Looks silly on a grown woman, especially if everyone else is wearing blue jeans and t-shirts. I just sure miss dressing up like that. Classifying women not wearing makeup as lazy and normalizing a fresh face on women, even to formal events. Sure, it looks nice, but can't a lady just rock some nice hair and a fancy outfit the same way men do? I was going to write along the lines of wearing little to no makeup becoming more socially acceptable versus the way it's interpreted now. I hate the generic responses of, "Oh, you didn't have time? I have some cosmetics in my purse. Are you okay? You look sick." You know, all that usual stuff. Men hugging each other often and showing affection. I used to see this when I was younger, then I think as a society we just decided to label such behavior as gay. Not drinking alcohol at gatherings. Dressing for comfort over style. I want to live in a world where it's perfectly fine to show up at a job interview in a sweatshirt. The need to wear nice clothes is an arbitrary rule we created for ourselves. Women also being able to skip wearing anything on their torso. It sucks that in hot weather, men and kids can roam around shirtless, but a woman can practically get arrested in some places for having her chest on display. Bras and bikini tops are freaking uncomfortable, not to mention the rubbish tan lines. I mean, at least people have started to make feeding your baby in public less of an issue, so who knows? Maybe I'll be able to pull them out in a few years. As a flat-chested woman, this annoys me the most. Those fat old dudes who have bigger melons than me can walk around freely shirtless, but if I show some skin, suddenly I'm a predator of some sort. Mothers can't even naturally feed their babies without getting shamed. I hate the South. Telling someone you're child-free or don't want children without being told, "You'll change your mind," and other related nonsense. Unfortunately, a lot of people find us odd or not real women for being uninterested in having children. It's not for everyone. Swinging around toy lightsabers when you're a teenager or adult. Abruptly leaving conversations that you don't want to participate in. For example, one could simply declare, "This bores me, goodbye," and then promptly depart. Going to the bathroom for 15 minutes. Let men drink sweet cocktails without being judged. Being asexual or aromantic. Uncomfortable silences. Why do we feel it's necessary to yak about BS in order to be comfortable? Being nice to kids. As a man, I'd just say talking to kids that aren't yours. Moms catch me just casually chatting with their kid and they get all defensive because I'm a stranger. It's tragic as a society that we live in constant fear and instill distrust in our children. I want to dance anywhere in public. No, I'm not on anything, I just love to dance. Not talking or smiling to anyone in public. It has nothing to do with you, people aren't happy all the time and sometimes I just want to get in and get out. Walking cats on leashes or in strollers. I walk my elderly cat in a stroller. She has kidney disease and likes to threaten birds. I'm determined to give her this beautiful retirement. Screw what other people think. Just being able to walk around wearing only your skin without people deciding that you're randy or an exhibitionist or whatever. Being free of clothes in the sun is an experience I wish everyone could have. Wearing cute childish stuff. People giving weird looks kinda ruins the fun. I personally don't think it's weird, but the majority of my country thinks it is. I'd make gay marriage legal in my country. Here in Hungary, it's an unaccepted thing. Saying the phrase, "I'm happy" or "this makes me happy." One time I made the mistake of saying that about my hobbies, and the person I talked to looked at me like I'd grown 2 heads. As adult people, it's frowned upon to make emotional remarks, and that shouldn't have to be weird if you want to share it. Besides, being or feeling happy is a disposition per se, and shouldn't have to relate to being an emotional talk. It's exhausting having to give explanations. Top hats and capes. Dumpster diving. As a society, we throw away so much, normalizing dumpster diving would save a lot of salvageable items from going into a landfill. No chit-chat as a social default. Man, this one just keeps coming up, huh? Again, I think I'm a villain to a lot of people who desire this. Maybe I'll just try shutting my pie hole next time silence hits. Not wanting to work hard. Not as in not wanting to have a job, but openly being able to admit that the prospect of working at least 35 hours a week for most of your life is insanely depressing and unappealing. Wearing a mask to not spread viruses. Requiring employers to post a salary on job posts. Everyone can stop wasting time this way. Plus, better chance at fair wages. A lot of things people seem to find weird that are actually harmless. Stimming, humming, hand flapping, preferring not to communicate verbally, enjoying quiet or being unintentionally loud. I guess I'd just like to normalize being polite. Let people be odd as long as they're harmless. For the past 6 years, I've been sleeping with him in exchange for discounts on our supplies and Outback Steakhouse gift certificates. People wearing masks. I love putting mine on so people don't see my face. Not wanting to hustle or make someone else rich. I don't want to put in 60 work hours so I can have a materially successful life. Dungeons and Dragons. It's not really as weird as people think. It's acting. We watch TV, movies, plays, it's not any different. And you're playing a board game at the same time. People really need to get over the whole satanic panic thing. It's not devil worship, and it's not really all that weird. It's a much more social activity and more mentally stimulating than binging Netflix or playing video games, and it's helped me make and sustain great friendships. A friend started DMing for a group of friends that I've never played before during the pandemic, and I've got to say it's the night of the week that I look forward to the most. But not just do stupid Zoom calls where we talk about COVID for an hour. Also, my character is part of my soul now. It's insane how quickly I connected to the guy. Men should be able to wear skirts and dresses. Sometimes we need some air down there and to look cute. And yes, I know kilts exist, but that's the Scots thing. Let people like what they like without being bullied for it. Not ironing our clothes. Like seriously, they don't really look worse if you don't do it, and if no one did it, we'd save so much time. Not shaving your legs. It's so wild to me that the assumption is that women should shave their legs because men think they'll look prettier that way. But men don't need to shave their legs because apparently women wouldn't think men would look prettier with shaved legs? Wearing the same attire every day. Not the same pair as the previous day, but the same type of shirts and pants. carrying around stuffed animals. They make me happy. I used to work at restaurants, and some employees were allowed to take breaks to smoke. I didn't smoke, so I never got any breaks. Every now and then, I'd just go stand in the walk-in freezer to cool off after I'd been running around the restaurant. My peers didn't like that I randomly disappeared for 5 minutes every now and then. I told them it's my smoke break. So I feel like short 5-minute breaks should just be allowed even if you're not a smoker. Platonic cuddling. Doing things later in the day, getting groceries at 10 p.m. or spa appointments at 8 p.m. and able to do vacuuming in my condo at midnight without my neighbors complaining. Society is set up for a 9-to-5 life. I agree with everything you've said except vacuuming at midnight. That would make me so angry. Whether I like it or not, I have to be up early, and hearing someone vacuum at midnight is just a jerk move. Do the stuff that would affect others during normal hours and do the quiet stuff on your schedule. 4-day work week. Men should be allowed to call their male friends their boyfriends, as ladies can call her female friends her girlfriends. Gotta level that playing field out. What's the movie so bad that it killed off the whole franchise? When The Cat in the Hat with Mike Myers was released, Dr. Seuss, or Theodore Geisel's wife, Audrey, was so disappointed and disgusted with how it turned out, she never approved of any more live-action adaptations. Subsequent films have now instead only used computer animation adaptations instead of live-action studio versions. It's a guilty pleasure movie for me. I love how gross and wacky it is, but I'm very aware that it deserves the legacy it got. Percy Jackson, Sea of Monsters. There were 3 more books in the PJ story, plus all of Rick Riordan's other books and spin-offs. There was so much potential, and it was just so botched. To be honest, the first movie killed the franchise. It wasn't very high quality to begin with, but more importantly, it was completely self-contained and didn't introduce any plot points of the series' longer story arc. Disney's The Lone Ranger and John Carter were both supposed to be the first of a series, like Pirates of the Caribbean. I feel like Pirates of the Caribbean was supposed to be a one-off movie that ended so successfully they decided to turn it into a franchise. Savvy? The Inkheart book series was fantastic. I was very dissatisfied in the movie, the only shining light being Brendan Fraser as the main guy. Green Lantern. They had big plans for a sequel and a wide story arc, but because the movie bombed at the box office, all of that was scrapped. Allegiant, the movie after Divergent and Insurgent. The end of the Divergent series was never made into a movie because Allegiant turned out so badly. I think because Harry Potter split the last book into 2 movies, everyone around that time tried to do the same for a cash grab. I'm looking at you, Hunger Games. So they split the last book into 2 movies, then changed the last movie into a TV miniseries, but forgot to check with the cast first. Since it wasn't in their contract and they didn't want to do it, they bailed. To be fair, Book Allegiant ruined the franchise as well. I was excited for the expanded world building, but the character undevelopment destroyed the narrative and series for me. My god, I was mad at Artemis Fowl. I had just read the entire series. I didn't have high hopes in the first place because of Disney's track record of book adaptations, but somehow I was still disappointed. They changed everything around, had bad acting, which I blame the director for, and they left out the most important scenes. Eragon could have been epic. Over a year later, I'm still kind of mad they messed it up so badly. I'm still hoping they'll try again now that some years have passed and the general audience has forgotten about it. I heard there were plans for a Stephen King cinematic universe of some sort, but given how badly Dark Tower did, that's probably never going to happen now. Considering how the movie has nothing at all to do with the books, I'm not surprised it was scrapped. I freaking love the Dark Tower series, and the movie was just a joke. Fantastic Four. The 2005 version wasn't bad, but the 2015 remake, or Fant4stick, was awful. We'll see how the new one is. The Avatar The Last Airbender film was terrible. When it came out, I saw it in theaters because I was, and still am, a big fan of Avatar The Last Airbender series. The moment they produced Aang's name as Ong, I knew the movie was going to flop. I came out of the theater so unsatisfied. I've never tried to give The Last Airbender movie another try since then. John Carter lost a crapload of money and was supposed to be a giant trilogy, but the first one flopped out the gate, to the tune of losing somewhere around $200 million at the end of the day, making it one of the biggest bombs of all time. Nearly or mostly killed Taylor Kitsch's career too, though I have to point out he was supremely excellent as David Koresh in the miniseries Wacko, and everyone should watch if they never have. I mean, I actually really enjoyed the film for what it was, but yeah, the marketing around it sucked. By which I mean I don't remember there being any marketing whatsoever. Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. The most expensive indie film and most expensive European film of all time. More than a $200 million budget. And it barely broke even at the box office, probably netting a 9-figure loss when factoring in marketing and publicity costs. Neither Cara Delevingne nor Dane DeHaan have worked much since, though this was hardly the first franchise killer either of them have been involved with. Self-Deletion Squad for Delevingne and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 for DeHaan being the examples. Allegiant. It not only killed its franchise by cancelling its Part 2, it made Hollywood not even want to make young adult fiction novels into movies anymore, since the whole series boiled down the genre to such basic elements there was hardly any flavour to it. Percy Jackson. I know it came out with 2 movies, but the first was so detested by fans that the fandom collectively decided to pretend they don't exist. As a result, the second one failed miserably, and it was never picked up again, despite being huge young adult movie material. Amazing Spider-Man 2. They had gigantic plans to spin off a gigantic Spider-Verse film out of that film, but it was such a muddled mess it brought it to a screeching halt. But hey, Spider-Man's back in the MCU, and Sony is trying to piggyback a Spider-Verse off of that, so it all worked out in the end. Queen of the Damned. Interview with the Vampire was amazing. 8 years later, they skipped the second book in the series and went straight to the third. I don't know why. The second book, The Vampire Lestat, was the best in the series. Maybe they couldn't get Tom Cruise to continue and just decided that would be the end of it. Then some idiot came up with the idea to do a crap job of Queen of the Damned and, well, the rest is history. Pacific Rim Uprising. The original Pacific Rim was the perfect kaiju movie in my opinion. I think that any sequel would have been ill-advised because the only way to really follow that would be more of the same, but bigger, and I don't think that's a sustainable formula. But what we got was even worse than that. The Last Airbender. I'm guessing by the ending they had elaborate plans to turn this into a franchise of all of the seasons, and wow, so horribly bad. I mean, they managed to mispronounce the names of all the characters. If you're going to turn a cartoon into a live-action movie, it's probably a good idea to have everyone involved in the project actually watch an episode or 2 of the cartoon first. Also, prior to the movie, I'd never even watched an episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender. I had an even greater appreciation of how bad they messed up after watching them all during the pandemic. Ouch. Imagine what the fight between Fire Lord Ozai and Ong would have looked like in the Shyamalan version. Slow, with garbage bending, and Ozai would probably look nothing like the series, and sprinkle in some corny writing and acting, then boom, Shyamalan approved. So the narrator's story was not unlike this commenter's. I'd seen bits of Avatar, but my first real exposure to the world was that bloody movie. And my god, I am not a hard man to please when it comes to cinema, but that thing was pure, unfiltered garbage. Only after having my arm endlessly twisted by friends did I watch the source material, and now, of course, I know that not only is it great, but its characters are some of the most wonderful in cartoon history. The Golden Compass. Their biggest crime was not including the ending to the book. How do you fade to black right before the best part? And completely cut the church out of a story that's fundamentally about resisting religion's attempt to control everything? Batman and Robin. There were multiple sequels planned, and instead the continuity was ended and rebooted 7 years later, with the Dark Knight trilogy completely changing the tone of the franchise to the exact opposite of Batman and Robin. As far as I remember, there was one movie planned called Batman Triumphant, which would have featured the Scarecrow, and the director was planning to make it right to give the franchise a movie worth of its name. But it was all cancelled, so he didn't get the chance to redeem himself. Sorry, Joel Schumacher. The ideas I remember hearing for sequels were Scarecrow creating Man-Bat, Scarecrow's gas causing villains from previous Batman films to reappear as hallucinations of Batman's fears. If they got Nicholson and DeVito back, this could have been interesting. And Harley Quinn, reimagined as Joker's daughter, showing up to get revenge on Batman for the death of her father. The latest version of The Mummy with Tom Cruise. It was supposed to herald a bunch of Universal Films monster feature reboots, including Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with Russell Crowe. I don't give a crap what he looks like. I wasn't going to watch any movie about a mummy without Brendan Fraser. Didn't Men in Black International kill off the 22 Jump Street sequel? Men on 23rd Street, yep. I Am Number 4. The movie is just awful as it leaves out so much cool crap from the books. It's just a shameless cash grab and your typical high school romance with guy gets special powers and falls in love with quiet girl. I thought Timothy Oliphant did a good job, but he's just a good actor. Warcraft the movie. It pains me so much to say this one because I am a WoW player and I actually liked it. I thought it was meh when I saw it in theatre, but now I've watched it at home half a dozen times and I like it more. I really wanted this to be the start of a whole string of Warcraft movies, but I just don't think that will happen. See, I thought they were making another one because even though it bombed here, it was like a massive blockbuster in China. And I actually liked the movie. Part of it was expectations. I'd heard it was god-awful and terrible and not worth my time, so my expectations were very low. But when I finally sat down to watch it, I enjoyed the hell out of it. Mortal Instruments, City of Bones. They changed so much of the story from the books that there's no way they could have come back from it. The Dark Tower. I tried to go into that movie with an open mind, knowing it wasn't going to be anything like the books. I really tried to give it a chance, but that movie is utter dog-do. The screenplay needed to be written by someone that had actually read the gosh darn book. Fantastic Four, 2015 version, Fantastic. The cast seemed pretty stellar too. Miles Teller, Michael B. Jordan, Kate Mara. Boy, was it bad though. Killed off any chances of a sequel. I think Crimes of Grindelwald will prove to be the downfall of the Fantastic Beasts franchise. I think a lot of people don't understand what killed off the franchise means. I found a comment saying Endgame. It's the second highest grossing movie ever, man. There's a difference between killing a franchise and closing a story arc. Infinity War only killed off half the franchise. Solo, which I actually didn't mind too much, killed off the plans for more Star Wars spin-off movies focusing on side characters. Instead, we got lots of Star Wars TV shows, which I'm more than cool with. This was written in 2020. Rest in peace, commenter. I wouldn't say it was Solo's fault. I'd blame The Last Jedi. I remember a lot of people refusing to see Solo to show the mouse how much they hated Episode 8. I saw Solo, it was cool. I would have preferred Han's origins from the EU though. That's the extended universe, not the European Union. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Eragon. It had 3 awesome books, it could have been the next Lord of the Rings, it had video games, and then out came that movie. It was such a flop that nobody wanted to speak of it ever again. To be honest, rereading the books past adolescence, I've realized the books are really not that great. The storylines are poorly written and Eragon is a horribly blatant, self-insert Gary Stew. The movies are somehow worse than that, but there was really zero chance that this series would ever be more than a guilty pleasure at best. King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. I'm sure this was meant to be the first in like 7 movies. It's a shame. They had a great cast, but it just bombed at the box office. Does Game of Thrones Season 8 count? But who has a better story than Bran the Broken? The boy who sat in a tree for like a whole freaking year. Hell yes it counts! I tried rewatching Game of Thrones recently and I just couldn't. The horrible ending has tainted the entire property. As far as prequels or other planned series, I do not give a single F. I was a committed fan, but not anymore. It still amazes me how Game of Thrones was on everyone's mind for a couple of years, and after the finale, it's almost as if it's been wiped out from the collective consciousness. Star Trek Nemesis killed off Star Trek movies for 7 years, and even then we got a reboot instead of a continuation of the old franchise. The Enterprise show, which is better than most people give it credit for, kept the franchise limping along for a couple of years after Nemesis, but the Prime Universe, as a franchise, was effectively dead up until they brought it back with Star Trek Discovery a couple of years ago. I do, however, think that the Next Generation cast as a whole had run out of a bit of gas from a storytelling and audience interest standpoint, and that Nemesis was basically the excuse used to move on from them. The movie Titan AE literally forced Fox Animation Studios to shut down permanently. Update: I looked up when Fox Animation Studios shut down and when Titan AE was released. Fox was shut down 10 days after the movie was released. A damn shame too, because that movie is actually fantastic. Dragon Ball Evolution. Shut up. We do not discuss that film. We don't even contemplate its existence. Rise of Skywalker is probably going to preclude a new Star Wars trilogy indefinitely. Episode 8 killed it for me. 9 just kinda kicked the corpse.
I find bashing Rise of Skywalker is literally flogging a dead horse.
Well, in particular, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but really the entire Chronicles of Narnia film series was so bad it killed off any desire for more films in the series, probably forever. I don't know. The first book had a lot of film potential if you ask me, and I outright liked the second movie. But after that, yeah, I think each book gets less and less filmable as it goes along. Maybe a TV series would have worked better. Color me surprised that nobody has mentioned Dune. The 1980s movies was really pushed hard before release. It was apparently going to be bigger than Star Wars, and then it flopped. After that, nothing until 2021. Artemis Fowl. I must save the world! No, idiot, you're a criminal prodigy holding a mythical creature against her will. The books did a good job of melting his cold heart over time to eventually become a bit of an anti-hero, but good lord, what a mess. Why can't anyone do young adult novels properly? Grease 2, and disclaimer, it is my favorite Grease and among my favorite Lifetime movies. Hot on the heels of the success of Grease, more Grease films were ordered. The production was a total crapshoot, the film was literally still being written as it was filming, there were cast issues, it flopped, and as a result, a potential plan for Greases 3 through 5 was scrapped. Bonus, years later those scripts were reworked and became another successful franchise, High School Musical. Any movie after Terminator 2 and the Terminator franchise. Look, I know I'm in the minority, but I didn't hate Terminator 3. It had some good elements, but they should have just gotten Cameron and Hamilton back to sew up the franchise. And then it just stopped. Could have been the greatest sci-fi trilogy ever, instead it's more like The Grandfather. First two awesome, third was a disappointment, and then trash. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Fantastic movie, and it had the setup for more sequels. It just didn't get the viewership it needed. Also, everything happening with Armie Hammer in 2021. I think it's safe to say the plans for a sequel have finished for good. It didn't kill the entire franchise, but I'm surprised Warner Bros. Still continued producing the other Fantastic Beast movies after so many people hated the second one because of awful storylines. There were too many new characters, terrible screenplay, creating new plot holes and errors, bad pacing, and not to mention that a lot of the storylines didn't really lead up to anything other than some fan service. It felt like the movie had an identity crisis and didn't know which main character should be the mascot of the franchise. Was it Newt, Dumbledore, or was it Credence? The movie didn't do any of these characters justice in the end. The Last Airbender. F.U. Shyamalan. Ender's Game. The source material is so good you don't even understand. Had the chance to be such a mega franchise. Instead, they cast Rico from Hannah Montana to play one huge pinnacle role, hired a kid who couldn't act to play Ender, completely missed 60% of what actually made the books good, and gave characters who make the story worth tuning in for no screen time. They took a masterpiece and made the worst version of it possible. I still remember the hour-plus long of disappointment in that movie. Solo. I've heard it's actually pretty good, but from what I remember, Disney did a real bad job of promoting it, combined with the recent backlash from The Last Jedi, and the fact that it was sandwiched in between Infinity War and Deadpool 2, meant it was basically destined to flop, and Star Wars hasn't since been able to really recover movie-wise. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's what convinced Lucasfilm to make the Obi-Wan adaptation a show instead of a movie. Ghostbusters 2016. It was so bad that the creators of the new Ghostbusters pretended it didn't happen. Sure, blame toxic masculinity instead of toxic lack of talent, toxic lack of ideas, or toxic femininity, or whatever the frick that would be. And sure, it's toxic masculinity, not toxic shameless cash grab. Now that I think about it, didn't actors and producers try to use toxic masculinity bullcrap to guilt-trip viewers for not liking the movie? If only they'd actually, written a script for it. Instead, they just had the actors ad-lib everything and try to get it in editing. Even the original Ghostbusters would have sucked if all they did was put Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis in a scene and told them to make crap up as they went. Are you talking about the all-woman movie? I avoided watching it until recently, and to be honest, I'm not really sure it deserved all the hate it got. As a standalone movie, it's pretty good. I'm not a huge fan of Leslie Jones in her role. That was my only major issue. Chris Hemsworth as the ditzy man-meat secretary was hilariously good casting. I'd say that if people haven't seen it, give it a shot. They won't be making any direct sequels, but it's good for a laugh. The remake of RoboCop was absolutely terrible. They made it PG-13. That right there was the first sign it was going to be crap. They tried a PG-13 RoboCop already, and RoboCop 3 will be streets ahead of the remake. Predator 2018 should have killed the franchise for a bit. Luckily, it didn't.
X-Men Dark Phoenix. Should have stopped at Logan, man. The Mummy with Tom Cruise. It was supposed to start a whole universe, the Dark Universe, with Mummy, Dracula, a couple of the others. But it flopped, and it took the whole universe with it. Titanic. They foolishly sunk the ship and killed off the male lead. Yeah, they really could have written what happened to that boat better. I mean, that's the great thing about fiction. You can make anything you want happen. I say in the inevitable reboot, we make the boat turn into a transformer and blast off into the sky, saving everyone. Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales seems like one. I know they haven't come out with any other movies after that, but I probably won't watch them even if they do. Must have watched the first 3 movies more than 10 times each. But Stranger Tides semi-killed it, and Dead Men Tell No Tales was the final nail in the coffin. Wonder Woman 1984. What a load of steaming garbage. Curse the damage you did to Pedro Pascal's career. Maze Runner 2. The first concept was really cool, but they just randomly changed it into a zombie movie? I like those, but please, keep them separate. Back in the early 2000s, I recall a whole string of attempted youth and young adult novel adaptations that sucked so hard there were never sequels. Eragon. In my opinion, the source material was already pretty meh, but the studio went full awful on it, bungling the story, maybe to avoid an angry letter from George Lucas, and trying to rely on cheesy effects. A series of unfortunate events. They tried shoving 3 books into a single movie, plus a dumb murder plot that wasn't in the books, rushing through it all with barely a plot while hoping one famous actor would carry the entire film. Thank goodness for the Netflix show. Cirque du Freak. A modern vampire young adult novel that was okay, and then there was this cheesy B-movie of the first book and the second book mashed together. Weirdly cast and directed, it didn't really seem like anyone making the film expected there to be a sequel. And there's others, I'm sure. Alien Covenant. There were supposed to be more prequels that brought us to the original Alien, but alas, it bombed. I hear there's a TV show in the works. It's too big of a franchise to actually kill, but the prequel series is cancelled. In some alternate world somewhere, the correct answer is The Fast and the Furious. Jaws the Revenge killed the entire Jaws series abruptly and got 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. Eragon, one of the most successful New Age fantasy series ever, and the directors hamstrung it in every way possible. At one point, the author was asked if he wanted to see a sequel, and he said he was still waiting on the first book to be made into a movie. I should repeat, this comment was written in 2021. I think Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull put an end to the Indiana Jones movies. Even though they were trying to pass the torch to Shia LaBeouf, I think he dropped it. I can't understand how the director could review that horrible Tarzan scene and say, "Yep, this goes in the final cut." Every Hellraiser after the third one. The first was amazing. Second, pretty good. Third, tolerable only because of certain scenes. After that, complete crap show. Highlander. Queen did Who Wants to Live Forever for the first one, and it got good reviews. The second and third were terrible. According to my dad, who watched it in theaters, he told the people lining up for the next showing the whole story because he didn't want people to go through the pain he went through. What insane crimes or crazy people happen at the night shift in your convenience store? I had a drunk guy come in fully clothed. He walked in for around a minute, stood in place for a minute, and then headed to the bathroom. When he came out, he was wearing nothing but his t-shirt. He left the store freebirding into the 3-degree weather. Never saw that guy again. A friend of mine found out during a robbery that the emergency button under the counter actually just locks you in the store with a now panicking armed robber. His boss later told him it was to prevent people from getting away. I mean, it did also put in a call to the alarm company, who eventually called the police, but for a good 25 minutes he really thought he was going to die in there. That sounds like a massive liability for the store. Most places tell their employees to cooperate. Cash can be replaced, lives can't. Worked overnight at a Quick Trip for 2.5 years. So many drunks. People who'd go number 2 or throw up all over the bathroom. Had another guy throw up from the middle of the store near the candy aisle all the way to the front door. Impressive, really. Had another guy fall down and break the roller grill. And one more guy threatened to unalive and then F me because his food stamp card declined. And there's some others that didn't happen on my shift, but there was apparently this one regular who'd come in and tell everyone that she was my aunt and flip out over the most trivial crap.
She threw a major temper tantrum one night and it took 4 cops to take her down. There was also the one coworker who'd get plastered on her nights off at the bar next door and draw male anatomy on her coworker's car. Alright, that last one was me. Oh boy, do I have a good one. So I worked at this gas station that constantly got robbed. One night it was me and this woman, and we were dealing with a couple of customers, when these 2 guys walk in, grab 4 suitcases of beer, and walk out the door. They were so slick about it that we almost didn't notice. They peeled out from the parking lot in an old white Ford F-150. So we called the cops, gave them our statements, and went on with our lives. Maybe 2 hours later, we see an old white Ford F-150 tearing down the street followed by frickin' 9 cop cars. We're like, holy crap! Maybe 15 minutes later, we see that same old white F-150 tearing down the street going the other way, followed by 14 cop cars. That's not an exaggeration, I counted them. So the rest of our shift goes by, about 5 hours, and we've forgotten about it. A cop stops in shortly before I punch out and is like, yep, they were in a stolen truck, we got the guys. So I clocked out, get in my car, go to leave and have to pause while this tow truck trundles on by. I pull in behind it and what's it towing? That same old white Ford F-150. Pretty cool that you got to witness the beginning, middle and end of a low-stakes GTA heist, to be honest. The cops and robbers Benny Hilling back and forth in front of the station could have been great if you had the security footage and yakety sax at hand. I once saw a man come in, stare at me for a few minutes, walk into the soda aisle and slowly pour a 2-liter bottle of Sprite down his pants. Then he left. I had a guy take too much smack in the bathroom at the gas station I worked at once, but that was at like noon, so I guess it doesn't count. On New Year's Eve 2012, a guy came into the store I was working at, super drunk while I was cleaning, and I assumed he didn't buy anything and left, until about an hour later when I found him asleep in the candy aisle. It all started when a guy no-called, no-showed again. I get called in so that another guy doesn't have to work 24 straight hours. It goes well, I'm tired, counting cash at 4 AM, and all of a sudden I hear a loud noise behind me. Then the rack of cigarettes behind me rains down like a waterfall. Once the cigarettes stopped, I brushed them off me, used colourful language to ask what was happening, to myself but out loud, and went to check outside. There was a Jeep pulled right back into the wall. I asked if the driver was okay, and she was, but I hear through her phone that wasn't even on speakerphone, "How the frick did you crash into a 7-Eleven?" So I called the cops and the owner and it all gets worked out. But when the cops arrived, they first laughed, then breathalyzed and alphabet tested the woman to see if she was drunk. She was not, just a tired or crappy driver. I'm betting crappy based on the phone call I overheard. The owner trusted me from then on as I ended up handling the initial insurance portion and regional manager pictures of the damage. The customers were impressed that I didn't crap my pants when it happened, and I've got the story now. While working an overnight shift at McDonald's, I once watched a guy go through the drive-thru in reverse because his window was stuck and he refused to open his door. We had a regular customer nicknamed Spoody, who was a shell-shocked Vietnam vet. He came in once and gave me $600 and just said, "Hold on to that for me, I might need it one day." I found out later they kept an envelope in the safe for him to make deposits into because his daughter would steal his disability checks. Another day, Spoody came in with a dirty, mangy-looking Spitz, and he goes and gets a mop bucket and a big jug of Mop and Glow and goes outside. He ties the dog up to the spigot near the entrance of the store, fills up the bucket and gets some good suds going, and then dumps it on the dog. The dog proceeds to attack him and bites him up pretty bad, and Spoody just bails and runs off. Meanwhile, the dog is tied up in front and mad as heck, and nobody could get in or out. We had to finally call animal control. They get there, accidentally unleash him, and the dog attacked one of the catchers and then ran off, presumably to find Spoody. Legend has it that that dog is still chasing Spoody. Not super crazy, but a few years ago I worked third shift at Walgreens. I was working and noticed a car in the parking lot with its lights on. I didn't think too much of it. An hour or two later, they were still there, so I told my manager. We went out to investigate, we're not supposed to do this, and noticed the car had a lot of damage on the driver's side of the car, and the driver was passed out on the steering wheel. We knocked on the window, and they woke up and were clearly wasted, and we noticed that there was a kid in a child's seat in the back. Long story short, we called the cops, and they gave them a sobriety test and arrested them. Saw their mugshot on the local newspaper website a few days later. I worked, briefly, at a gas station convenience store. The owner of the gas station, my boss, when he tends the store, just sits in the back room doing whatever, while he has his German Shepherd chill near the cash register. He somehow trained him to bark 3 times whenever a customer comes up to the cash register to pay. My boss will then hear the 3 barks and walk out of his back room to tend to the customer. The dog only does it for my boss though, but not for me or any of his other workers. That dog also pees into the toilet bowl by standing on the toilet seat. While my crew and I were on break, sitting on the loading dock at our grocery store, we witnessed a very drunk man coming from the recently closed bar try to steal a Christmas tree from our parking lot. We let him get about 20 feet with it, which took him a good 10 minutes, before yelling at him and scaring the crap out of him. At a Missouri-based convenience store, we had a guy in our parking lot doing what looked to be Tai Chi at 1 in the morning. He'd do the motions, then kick-flip off the side of the building and go back to doing the motions. We told him he needed to stop doing that. He goes to the pumps, takes the nozzle off, buzzes for inside pay, chooses a grade of fuel and splashes it in his mouth. He spits it out, chooses another grade and does it again. This is the point where we called the cops. After he was done mouthwashing with fuel, he comes in and just starts loading up with bags of chips, candy bars, a single 12-ounce Bud Light from a 6-pack. Half of that stuff was opened up while he was doing it. Cop gets there and tells the guy he needs to pay and then puts him in the back of his car. Word from the cop the next day was that he was an extremely disturbed individual and he was admitted to a mental ward. Creepy as heck. That was by far the weirdest. I've had a 45-year-old drunk lady very forcefully hit on me, people taking deuces in the bathroom and playing finger paint all over the walls as well. I had one idiot, one time, that stuffed a 6-pack down his pants, walked down the aisle, dropped it on accident and had 5 cans drop and just roll away, and he walked out the door. By far the most disgusting was someone placing the 2 plungers in the bathroom on adjacent walls and balancing a little turd on each of them. I just couldn't put my head around that one. And this last one isn't mine, but down the road at a competing convenience store, they had a guy one night come in, sit down at one of their tables, and fillet himself from ear to ear. Even hearing that story still bothers me. Okay, with that final one, I think you win the award for the most disturbing stories so far. Your prize is, well, a whole bunch of regrets about your part-time job in college and nothing else. Sorry. But in fairness, that is a pretty normal way to feel about the things we do for a living at that time of our lives. Probably way too late to get in on this, but I used to work on Bourbon Street, got loads of stories. Once found a gat in the urinal while a guy was fighting with one of our shot girls. I take a moment, hide the gat carefully, and ask my boss about it. He points to the guy, who has an empty holster. Then had a guy pick up a girl from the restroom because I am leaving right now. Except she was still using the bathroom. You never want to be the guy with the mop on Bourbon Street. Also watched another guy argue with a cop about football or something. He started getting mad and then he hit the fudging cop in the jaw. One of the bouncers from down the street walked up and grabbed the guy while like a billion cops came from God knows where. And finally, the frickin' working girl walking up to me with some powder and asking me if I could tell whether or not it was white snow. It was crushed Smarties, by the way. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I had a guy come into the gas station where I was working about a year ago. Obviously on something, but I have a lot of regulars that are addicts, and most of them aren't violent, they're just weird. So he wanders around the aisle, occasionally looking over and staring at me for like 10 seconds or so each time. After the final customer leaves, he comes up and pulls out a tiny little pocket knife, the Swiss Army knife kind. Looks at me and says, I was supposed to do something very bad to you, but I decided not to, I think. All while opening and closing his knife. Robbing me is one thing, but this guy is just directly threatening my life. He gives me the knife, just hands it to me, tells me to hold on to this for me, looks around for about 15 seconds and asks for it back. Obviously, I shouldn't give it back to him. This guy just threatened to murder me, but he is huge. About 6'3", 200 pounds, lean muscle. He could have killed me with his bare hands, so I just gave it back to him. He tells me to keep your eyes open, and just leaves. I called the cops after he left. Turns out he's an Iraq vet who wasn't taking his medicine. Such a shame. I started open carrying after that though, since the owner was a pro-weapon conservative. Really cleared out a lot of the troublemakers, so I haven't had anything that crazy since then. I did have one homeless guy try to pay for junk food with jewelry before asking about any houses for sale in the area. That guy wasn't interested in buying a house, if you catch my drift. Oh, and yesterday I found some used needles in the trash, so that was fun. Another time I had this lady comment on my weapon, talking about how she wanted one. This was right after trying to sell me a scale that has what I can only imagine was substance residue on it, with the other customers in the store. Bold frickin' move. She runs into the bathroom for 20 minutes, during which a local police officer comes in to buy some cookies. Perfect timing. My coworker tells him what's up, so he calls for backup and they search her and find some smack and stuff. Turns out she was shooting up in the bathroom and left some blood on my floor, which upset me the most because I had to clean that crap up. So I've seen a lot of small weird things, but those are the ones I remember most. Whataburger ex-worker here. Night shifts really do vary. Saturday, end of spring break, a house party was broken up. All the kids came to the Whataburger all of a sudden. I saw the Snapchat videos of the cops breaking it up. These kids thought the corner table was a good rolling table for doobies. At the end of the shift, I saw the same cops that were in the Snapchat videos. I told them the party they broke up just rolled through here, and they laughed. There was another 4th of July. I did a 10 p.m. shift to 5 p.m. There were loads of green herb hippies, drunk people. It was busy. I love the chaos of drunk people. This one guy tried to just walk behind the counter. And then there was New Year's Eve. It was jam-packed, our manager gave us beads to wear for, quote, a morale boost, and some drunk lady thought we earned them like they do at Mardi Gras. I said no. I lied to her saying we danced for them. So of course she wants the shiny beads. I told her I did a little teapot dance for them. She drunkenly did the dance in the lobby. I said it wasn't good enough, so she huffed and sat down. My manager thought it was pretty funny. All in all, pretty sane for a Whataburger. I ruled the diner and kept it in check. I worked a 24-hour BP garage. We had an old creepy Russian bloke, no English and cheap tracksuit, walk in at about 1 a.m. He bought something and I thought he was stroking himself through his trousers while I served him, until after he left when we noticed a puddle on the floor. Turns out he had peed all over the place while standing at the till. Not a fun one to clean up after. This happened in '96 at a store in Live Oak, Florida called Suwanee Swifty. We were located on Walker Avenue, which at the time was referred to as Smack Alley. On Friday and Saturday nights, we'd have a huge number of cars in the parking lot and lots of shoplifting, people taking substances and getting drunk in the lot as well. I'd already had to call 911 on a heart attack in the bathroom and 2 others in the parking lot at different times during my career there. Anyway, I was working the store alone and was at the tail end of a double shift that was turning into a triple. I'd been there since 5 a.m. and it was coming up on 1 a.m., and my relief, which happened that night to be my manager, called in drunk and said I'd have to stay till 5 when the next morning shift came in. I was mad as hell, and I could see people just openly stealing stuff and basically daring me to say anything about it. One of the workers came in from a different location and told me to just shut down for the night. I tried asking people to leave, but they wouldn't. I had maybe 40 people in the store by then. Finally, I called the cops and then got up on the counter and made the announcement that cops were on their way. Everyone had about 3 minutes to take whatever they wanted and get the F out. It took about 3 minutes to clear us out of every case of beer and every 40 of malt liquor, not to mention most of the bread and beef jerky and even the big jar of pickled eggs and pig's feet we kept on the counter. When the last person left, I put a chain and padlock on the door and went home. The next day I came by at lunchtime and police and insurance people were there along with the still drunk manager who showed up hours late for the morning shift and had no idea what was going on. I asked if I was on the schedule for the week and she just slowly shook her head and told me to get out. Honestly, I don't know why anyone would want to work that job if it really was just such a hive of scum and villainy. If people will just that openly steal stuff, then you're probably lucky nobody ever got violent there. Screw that. Maybe I should thank my lucky stars that all of my jobs were in restaurants. Not a convenience store story, but for a while I was a manager at a seedy dive bar in a dodgy strip. We were open from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. and would get all sorts of people in. One morning, a woman orders 3 drinks and 3 meals. She looked a bit out of it, but we'd get a lot of people coming off night shifts, so didn't think much of it. She proceeds to sit at one of our 4 outdoor tables, downs 3 glasses of cheap wine, and when her meal comes, she starts feeding the nearby pigeons, tearing her schnitzels with her hands and just dropping them. She then escalated to chewing her food and spitting it at the ground, quickly attracting loads of birds, so I politely requested that she stop feeding the birds. She acts really affronted, like I was the weirdo, but says she'll stop feeding them. When I turned to walk back inside, she screams, "I'll frickin' drag you to the car park and stab you in the throat with a screwdriver, you C-word." Lucky the cop shop is opposite the bar and they didn't take long to respond, but it did take 4 cops to subdue her. I have a number of stories from when I worked the graveyard shift at a Stuckey's a couple of years back. I kept a blog at the time, so I can copy a few of them onto here. There was a car containing a man and a woman stopping in front of the store. The woman got out, came in, and asked for some rubber male contraceptives. As I was directing her to them, which was taking longer than it should have as she was fairly dim-witted and drunk, she looked out of the window and freaked out. The guy she'd come here with had driven off without her, and he had her phone and purse. She used the store phone to call the police on him and to call her brother for a ride, while insisting that the guy is either going back to jail or gone get smashed by her brother, or possibly both. Her brother never showed up, but she eventually convinced another customer to give her a ride by giving him $3 for gas and saying that she needed help to beat the F out of her baby daddy. Another night, someone stole all of the urinal cakes out of the urinals. Tasty. Then there was the following conversation. I was ringing up a policewoman's purchases when this guy comes in from outside. He says to the cop, "Well, hey, I haven't seen you in ages. How have you been?" Cop goes, "Fine. You?" "Oh, I've been all right. I thought they were about to call you at the Waffle House next door." "Oh, why's that?" "Yeah, they brought out my steak and it weren't even an inch thick and hardly 4 inches long." This was followed by 30 seconds or so of incoherent redneck speech, something about to-go plates, and then something about his wife, and something about saran wrap. "Oh hey, that intersection over there, is it illegal to make a U-turn?" Only if it's marked." "Thanks, 'cause…" Another rambling dialogue of incoherence. The guy then leaves. I said, "What?" The cop turned to me and said, "I have no clue. I do not know that guy." Did he say that he flipped out at Waffle House because his steak was too small? Yep. This is a direct quote from another customer, apropos of nothing, regarding the woman he came in with. "I should just leave her by the side of the road. I'd done my first wife like that." There was the time a customer tried to use his house key as an ID. He was definitely on something. And another tried to use a DUI citation. He wasn't on something. One regular customer seemed to earnestly believe that I knew how to help him with his problems, and would constantly ask me for advice. His problems seemed to all center around people in black who make trouble for him every city he visits by putting the works of the devil on him. I wasn't really able to come up with any helpful solutions for him. There was the time a drunk driver got into a car accident just outside the store, calmly exited his heavily damaged car, and came in to buy some Aleve and a drink. All while cops outside were trying to figure out where the driver had gone. There was a man who must have been somewhere north of 60 wandering into the store shirtless, showing off his chest ring and Third Reich tattoo. Oh, and every Saturday night we had to lock all of the doors and turn off the lights before the nightclubs closed because a mob of drunken lunatics would swarm to the Waffle House next door, usually forming an impromptu party and quasi-riot in the parking lot. This policy developed at a store that is otherwise never closed because it simply cost too much to let them into the store where they inevitably broke and stole stuff. I used to work the graveyard shift as a waiter at IHOP. One night, as I was checking out a group of people, a man covered in sweat hurries through the front door and stammers out, "Where's the bathroom?" I point to the back and continue taking orders. About 10 minutes later, I see him in a corner booth, shaking back and forth and muttering under his breath like a madman. I ask a table if they know what his deal is, but they're just as weirded out as I am. I go up to him and ask if he wants a water or something to drink, but he doesn't address me, so I just go back to the kitchen. After I tell my manager, I see 3 cops quickly enter the restaurant and detain him. Turns out the guy was high on crystal and crashed his car into a bank about a block away and then ran to the IHOP. I worked at Wawa. One night this guy comes in and I'm assuming he had a mental disorder. Anyway, he walks towards the gas pump and puts the handle where the gas comes out into his mouth. He then grabs a lighter and starts flicking it. My manager had to beg him to put the handle thing back in the pump. Waffle House in Albuquerque on the edge of the war zone, 1993, pre-cell phone. After 9 p.m., the office was locked and the only other phone took incoming calls only. No outgoing. Just me and another chick. I was 18 and she was 19, working the night shift. Every few weeks, some smackhead would come in and start picking up the plates off the tables and smashing them on the grill. We couldn't call anyone and they were between us and the door, so we'd just have to ride it out, and after they left, try and get all of the glass out of the grill so we weren't serving bloody mouth hash browns. Children of helicopter parents. What was the most embarrassing thing they put you through? When I went away to college, my parents would call me every day. I went away to a fraternity weekend during my freshman year where us pledges weren't supposed to bring our phones. I told my parents that I'm going away for 3 days and not to call me. On the day we were coming back, the guy driving us got a call. He then hands me the phone and tells me to call my parents. It turns out that when my parents couldn't reach me for 3 days, they came to my college and went around my dorm and half the campus asking everyone if they'd seen their lost little boy. I was 18 at the time. On top of that, since I was on their family cell phone plan, they looked up all the numbers I'd recently called and texted. They proceeded to call everyone, letting them know that I was lost and asking if they knew where I was. This included girls I had crushes on but barely knew, random classmates, and mild acquaintances. When I got back to my worried parents waiting for me at my dorm, I found my cell phone with a bunch of messages of people asking if I was okay and letting me know my parents were looking for me. For the next day, every 1 in 5 people I walked past asked me if I talked to my parents because they were looking for me. My grandmother once did something similar to my dad, except he wasn't at a frat retreat, he was on a training exercise in the Air Force. When she couldn't get a hold of him, she called the base commander's office, then Washington, D.C. He got some crazy work detail, cleaning gum off the dumpster if I recall correctly, as punishment for his mom being nuts. My cousin had an interesting freshman year experience. She was roomed with another girl with a helicopter mother, and the mother slept in this tiny dorm room with the daughter and my cousin for several weeks until she could convince the RA to kick her mother out. My dad followed me into jury duty when I was 21 because he didn't believe that I could do it myself. I insisted that he didn't come, but he did it anyway. He was stopped by security guards outside the area and threw a huge fuss about not being able to accompany me. Most of the courtroom was confused and weirded out. Luckily, they didn't need me throughout the trial, so I was dismissed. There's a lot more weird crap that my dad does, but this one stood out to me when I first read this post. Does he not understand how jury duty works? Helicopter parents don't understand how a lot of things work. Yes, indeed. Why would a brain incapable of grasping the concept of their offspring's adulthood or independence be sophisticated enough to get other facts of life straight? It's been a while since I've done a helicopter parent video. Looking forward to jumping into some real denial and inability to let go. I didn't go to any school dance or sports event. No prom, nothing. I was not allowed to go to the mall by myself when I was 19 years old. My dad would follow me around. Like, he'd walk about 5 feet behind me. When I was 20, I said I was going to get a cell phone and got into a big fight with my parents because they didn't want me to have one. I'd been working since 15 and was going to pay for it myself. I couldn't lock the door to my bedroom, or the bathroom, even in my early 20s. Moving out was the best thing ever. I remember when I was 12 or so, my mum, little sister, who was 7 at the time, and I went to Costco to do some shopping. My dad showed up dressed as a clown. He used to dress up for birthday parties, and followed me and my little sister around honking his clown horn in our ears, yelling to all the guys that he was our dad. He still shows up at my work and tells my coworkers to tell him that my daddy is here to see me. I'm 31. I think the last time I called him daddy was when I was 7, 8. Nobody calls him daddy anymore, except for possibly my mum. Oh boy, today I learned what my mum is, judging by your other stories. I had a field trip when I was 10 years old that I was very excited to go to. The morning of my field trip, my grandma picks up a call from the school saying that the trip is cancelled. I was delighted by the fact that I could play video games all day, but disheartened at the fact that I missed out on my field trip. Next day comes and I go into class. I remember asking the professor, "When are we going on the field trip since it was cancelled yesterday?" And the professor just looks at me with this puzzled face as if I was stupid or something. I end up finding out that my mum called my grandma and told her to act as if the school had called her and pretend that the school cancelled the trip. Apparently my mum was afraid of the school bus flipping over and combusting into flames, while also there being a possibility of me being preyed upon by sinister teachers or boys. I had to make an account to post this story. Shout out to my mum for inspiring me to do so. Ugh. I work in an ER and I get sick and tired of helicopter parents bringing their offspring in for ridiculous reasons. Like he got a nosebleed a week ago and again today. She's been having foot pain after PE. Stuff like that. The worst are the parents that bring their 18 years or older kids into the ER because they want them substance tested. I love turning to the legal adult in front of me and asking, "Do you consent to this?" The parent normally turns beet red and starts yelling at me about how they're the parent and they pay the insurance, yada yada yada. At which point I remind them their precious child is now an adult and without their child's express consent, I can't perform any tests on them. I've seen more than my fair share of light bulbs go off over the kid's head and them flat out refuse all lab work. I tell them, all right, you heard them, I can't do anything. This normally ends up in a call to our hospital administrator, who'll tell them the same thing. I'm also not allowed to give out any information over the phone, as I cannot verify you're the legal guardian, nor in the room without express permission. It's fun to watch people's veins throb when they can't get their way. My uncle hired a private investigator to follow my cousin to see if she had a boyfriend. She was 21 years old at the time. When I was engaged to my now husband, I was given many long lectures by my parents about how I couldn't lean my head on his shoulder or ever be alone with him because it would lead to him having uncontrollable urges, which would then lead to him committing the unspeakable act on me, and it would be my fault for working him up. These lectures became daily and increased in absurdity. I'm glad my husband was able to stick it out. Things are much better now that I live with him on the other side of the country. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of comments about my dad maybe thinking my boyfriend would do these things because he did them to my mum. The thing is, my parents actually have a happy marriage, so I'm sure that's not the case. However, once I was married, I did get lectures about how men have high libidos and I was not supposed to turn my husband down, since doing so would give him no choice but to stray. Same exact idea as above with the same blame. Well, awful. I'm not sure that I'd consider that grape, since there is consent given by the woman, even if it is a consent that's there from brainwashing. Still, it's awful and unhealthy. Also, these ideas were coming from both my parents, and they were in agreement. It wasn't just from my dad. I wasn't allowed to hang out with girls when I was younger, and one day I was at the school park with some of my friends, and there were a couple of girls there too. My mum called me on the phone to ask who I was hanging out with. I only mentioned my male friends. Well, apparently my mum was spying on me with binoculars. The park was just a few blocks from my house. As soon as she saw the girls, she drove to the park, got out and made a big scene about it in front of everyone, and made me go home. That probably wasn't even the most embarrassing thing she's put me through, to be honest. There have been countless other situations. My buddy had the worst helicopter mum. We were going to college 3 hours away from his hometown and ended up at a random after-bar party with people we just met that night. His mum showed up, no idea how she found us, walked in and grabbed him by the ear and dragged him out to her car. She then proceeded to drive back to our hometown. The next day, she made him get a ride back to college with his former high school sweetheart that he had recently broken up with. She had done all of this because Mum didn't approve of the breakup. It was probably a phone tracking thing. Pretty sure he's still on the family plan at the time. He's now married to a woman who is, in my opinion, also rather controlling. Oedipus is real. Ooh, you've just reminded me of that somewhat humorous bit in the otherwise meh It Chapter 2 movie, where you find out that Eddie is married to someone virtually identical in appearance and temperament to his controlling, hypochondriac mother. Gross, but a somewhat funny callback for fans of the first movie. Depriving me of internet. In grade 9, I was only allowed to use my laptop in the kitchen to do my homework. My parents blocked Facebook, but I found websites that helped me use it. In grade 10, I was allowed to take my laptop to my room, but my dad turned my internet on and off every other hour from 8 in the morning until midnight, at which point it shut off for the night. It was ridiculous because I could never sit down long enough to get any work done before the internet was gone, and I had to wait for the next hour. My dad found out about the chat sites I used as a workaround for Facebook and blocked those. I resorted to using Bing Bar's Facebook chat function, which was slow and glitchy. In grade 11 and 12, my internet was shut off at 1 in the morning and parental controls were removed. I went crazy and watched Netflix and talked to people all the time, which obviously had a negative toll on my grades. In short, my parents forced me to use Bing. I dated a guy in college who had the craziest helicopter parents. As a 20-year-old guy, he wasn't allowed to leave his condo that they owned. They lived about 30 minutes away and constantly called to make sure he was there. He was literally expected to go directly from class to home every single day. When we went out, for dinner or to the movies, he had to use cash because his parents checked every single purchase on his bank statement and would question him about them. He wasn't allowed to drive, so he had to commute by bus to school every single day, which took the ride out to about 45 minutes. One time we went to a summer concert in downtown and his mum called him. He ran out of the concert so he could find a quiet spot to talk to her, and then he was so scared he made us leave the concert. The reason he put up with all of this was because his parents were paying for everything. The nice condo he lived in, his tuition, that stuff. He had never worked a day in his life. Not sure what he's doing now, but I'm pretty sure they still have that hold on him. A friend of mine growing up. Whenever she came next door to hang out, her parents would watch her leave, walk across the lawn and enter my house, and then she had to call when she got inside. What is there even to say? I'm in the place you just saw me go into? A lot of people are saying this sort of makes sense. I'd get it if it was maybe a couple of minutes away or down the block, but we lived in suburban townhouses. It was maybe 100 feet and 15 seconds of travel time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My mum would do random checks on my phone every couple of days. Out of nowhere, she'd ask for my phone, and I'd have to hand it over. My parents also didn't believe in dating, they believed in courting. Because of that, I felt the need to keep all of my relationships secret. One day she asked for my phone before I'd had the chance to delete any incriminating texts, and I knew there was some, steamy stuff on there from my significant other. So I handed it over, knowing stuff was about to hit the fan hard. I went and sat down, but I just couldn't handle it. I got up and walked right out the door. I was wearing my PJs still and hadn't put on shoes. I ran for a while and then started walking. Didn't realize I was crying until I slowed down. It took my parents about 20 minutes to find me. But hey, I ended up marrying the guy I was texting, so I've got that going for me. I was on leave from Iraq. Turned 21 during that time period, and my parents still made me be home by midnight. I was a gosh darn combat veteran, and I needed to be home by midnight. Ha! One time I went to the mall with my friends, which was very rare because I didn't often get to have friends. Obviously, to get there, my parents had to drop me off, so they drove away. But then an hour into our hangout session, which consisted of walking around the mall and me telling her jokes, it was fun, my mum texted me and asked where I am. I text her back and tell her I'm at the mall, where she dropped me off. She accused me of leaving, and demanded I take a picture of where I am to prove I'm still there. Reluctantly, I did, confiding in my date about my narcissistic mother for the first time to anyone. Telling someone about it felt good. Until about 5 minutes later, when she used the picture I sent her to find out where I was and approach me. This is when I discovered she never actually went home and was following me around the mall the whole time, watching what I was doing. She told me we had to leave right now because she was worried I'd run away and grabbed me by the arm to take me away, leaving my date there. This is not the only time she embarrassed me. Among other things, she called a good friend of mine's parents to tell them he was doing substances. He wasn't, just so that I wouldn't ask to go over to see him. My parents had this frickin' tracking device activated in my cell phone. All throughout high school, they knew exactly where I was. That is, until I'd leave the damn thing at the place where I told them I was going and go off wherever I wanted. They were the very definition of helicopter parents. My mother once drove to my workplace after school when I was 17 to check and make sure I was actually working. She then freaked out at me when I got home because she claimed I wasn't there, when really she just didn't drive all the way into the parking lot to avoid being seen, since she drives such a distinct car. That was around her phase of thinking I was on hardcore substances and sleeping with the entire male population of the town. I was an A+ student who worked every day after school plus weekends. I don't know when she thought I'd have time for all of that. Not the most embarrassing thing, but the only one I feel okay sharing. She'd constantly go through my phone and read everything when I wasn't around, and I'd find out when she brought up embarrassing information in front of my friends, family, and crushes. Once she found my crush on Facebook and messaged him a super long message that I don't even want to know what it said. All I know is that he was really uncomfortable when he asked me if I knew she contacted him. As for the worst part about it, I never felt a sense of freedom. I always felt watched. I was never a bad kid, but I could feel her eyes on me day and night. I felt like I never had my own sense of self. That whole crush thing, is this them trying to be funny or wanting to know more, or having no social skills? Or a very deliberate social sabotage to cut off your other connections? You see, I want to believe that at least some of these people are just stupid rather than evil, but they aren't making it easy. My parents called my trade school when I was frickin' 19 years old to make sure I was attending. They didn't have a reason to suspect I wasn't going, and they weren't the ones paying for it. I moved out very soon after. This wasn't the worst, but it was one of the last. Monitored my adult activity and brought up the adult smut I watched at the dinner table in front of my younger siblings and a friend who was over for dinner. They told me watching porn would leave me morally depraved and difficult for anyone to love. I was 13. Reading these posts has made me really appreciate how awesome my parents are, because F me, there are some awful, awful parents out there. Oh, one of the more memorable experiences. When I was a freshman, my cousin was a senior, and through him I made a lot of friends that were upperclassmen. So at the end of the year, I got invited to go to prom. My parents made my date, the one who was just a friend, come over 2 weeks before prom and basically asked him every question imaginable. They got his phone number, home number, email, the works. He was really chill about it because my cousin had warned him beforehand. When prom actually came around, I wasn't allowed to ride in the limo with everyone else. Instead, my mum drove me in an ugly Astrovan that looked like the Mystery Machine, and she had my siblings and cousins packed in there with her. When we got to the venue, she got off with me and asked an administrator if she could stay. Thank God he said no. And I had curfew, 8:30 p.m. It was 7 when I got there. For everyone saying it was a bit weird that my cousin's older friend wanted to take me to a room full of older students, he is gay, and my parents were well aware of that. The Astrovan was handed down to me after I graduated, and I loved it until the end. I have loved to write since I was very young. My mum had this weird obsession with going through my stuff, and one day, while I was going through her stuff, I found a crap ton of my own writings. She read all of my stuff and saved it. I felt incredibly violated. I threw everything away, which I deeply regret, because I would have loved to read about my teen angst now that I'm going through my late 20s angst. One night I decided to visit my boyfriend at his apartment for some TV time and cuddles. I ended up restarting my phone and forgetting the turning it back on part. While cuddling in front of the television, I fell asleep. At around midnight, my mum calls and it goes straight to voicemail. Now, any logical person would just figure the phone had died or didn't have service. Very reasonable where I live. Not my mother. She called the cops and tried to report me missing, which ended with the police asking how long I'd been gone for. She responded with, about 8 hours, and they tell her to wait until morning. At this point, it's about 1 a.m. and I'm still asleep. We both are. Fast forward about 2 hours and my mum has called and woken up all of my friends, hunting for me with no luck. She calls my best friend and she tells mum that I'm at my boyfriend's apartment. My mother now knows that I'm safe and not missing. This is not enough for her though. She ends up coming to the apartment after pestering best friend enough for the location. My best friend doesn't know the exact apartment, so she just told her the complex name and went back to bed. I woke up at almost 4 a.m. with my mother banging on the door, yelling, "Open the fricking door!" I run thinking something is wrong and fling open the door to find her red. Metaphorical steam is pouring from her ears. She yells for me to get in my truck and get home now. The next day, when I visit my boyfriend and apologized profusely for what my mother had done, I discovered that she had banged on every single door until she found the right one. I was 18 at the time. It didn't take much longer before my relationship ended. This is one of very, very, very many similar stories. My parents weren't helicopter parents per se. It was mainly my dad who was really strict only about movies. For example, when I was in high school, I asked if I could go to the movies with my friends. It was a G.I. Joe movie that I wasn't super into, but it was mainly to just do something fun. My dad said he wouldn't let me go unless I wrote a paper on the movie after I watched it about its redeeming qualities and Christian principles. Mum read in my diary that I'd lost my virginity to my boyfriend of the time. She called my school's principal to tell him that guy had unspeakable acted me. I mean, I guess that's marginally better than punishing you for doing something consensually and legally, since you could essentially tell the school that it was mutual. But still, so far away from cool and thoroughly deserving of you going no contact at your first opportunity. I'm still a teenager, so I'm still putting up with my parents' helicopter habits. They were furious when I found out I'd watched The Hunger Games at a friend's house. Same thing happens whenever I watch a movie rated PG or above and they're not there to fast forward through the kissing scenes and mild cursing. They don't allow me to spend money without telling them first. I once bought a pack of gum without telling them. It wasn't pretty. Long story short, I got my phone taken away for a week after being chewed out for a solid hour. My dad has software on my phone that tells him whatever I do on the internet. This includes texting and calling. He'll probably see this, but I don't care. I'd better stop typing now. They might catch me. Most of my childhood is a fog, but I have memories of being in and out of the doctor's offices all the time growing up. They often had me on multiple prescriptions. The doctors never really spoke to me, They'd speak to my parents, and then I would take whatever pills or undergo whatever treatment I was instructed to take. This continued until I was 18. I still to this day have never been told what was up, and I have no access to early medical records. I'm 39 now and perfectly healthy with no ailments or health conditions that I'm aware of. I don't remember any of the names of the doctors. We moved around a lot, and this was the 80s and 90s in the US, so I don't think the medical records were centralized in any way. I wouldn't know where to begin tracking them down. I don't ask my parents about it, partly because it seems pointless without being able to verify their answers, but mostly because I just have no desire to revisit that part of my past. I'd rather just focus on being a happy and healthy adult who lives far away from the rest of his family. I look up from reading this thread to see my 2-year-old eating dirt. I'm doing it right. People who help fight human trafficking, what tips do you have for spotting and reporting it? I'm an intern at a human trafficking task force. It really helps just knowing the basics because I had no idea everything that it entails. There's trafficking of women, the one we all know the most about, labor trafficking, and organ trafficking. Trafficking happens through force, fraud, and/or coercion. Trafficking is something of value that is being exchanged. The something of value can be food, shelter, clothes, and money. You get the gist. There's also the age issue. Anyone under the age of 18 that does stuff in exchange for a good is automatically considered a human trafficking victim. Even if the legal age of consent is 16, a 16-year-old can't have consent to commercial activities of that type. It also doesn't matter if they say they're 18 and have fake identification proving they're 18. If you're caught paying someone that's legally 16 for a certain kind of act, you are human trafficking. My organization is holding a webinar of this soon, and we also have social media where we explain the issues. Visualization helps us fight human trafficking, and so do donations if you can. We're a non-profit. Thanks for listening. I work as front desk for a hotel. I had a couple of experiences with this. You should look out for groups of 2 to 3 where one person does all of the talking, specifically when the others look scared or are overly covered, or cringe when the talker is speaking. Also if they look like they're under the influence of something. Ensure that you get ID from all parties when you suspect something is going down, note their room numbers and the names given, trust your gut, what we call a gut feeling. It's a combination of millions of tiny factors you might not knowingly be aware of. Tiny details like hitched breathing, micro-expressions, specific lying tells, environmental factors, stuff like this. These all add up and let your subconscious mind make connections that your general mind might not. Trust that feeling if you suspect something is wrong, and contact the police to inform them of a suspected human trafficking issue. Both times my gut told me to call it in, I ended up regrettably being correct. Here in Spain, we get a lot of women from Eastern Europe and Sub-Saharan Africa. Some pay for their trip to Europe this way. Some are blackmailed and some are lured offers of jobs like cleaning, or low-level administrative jobs like secretaries or paper pushing. They end up in a roadside brothel. If you're a young woman in a poor area of Eastern Europe and you get an offer for an easy job in Germany, France, Spain, or the Netherlands, be very suspicious. Not really helping fight human trafficking, but if you're watching a naughty film and you spot someone you think even has the remotest possibility of being too young, you can go to the website missingkids.org to report it. Well, out of necessity here, the narrator is going to be using very watered down and vague language for what is a very serious and obscene ongoing practice in the world. But yes, make no mistake, we're talking about the kidnapping, subjugation, and transport of people of all ages against their will or while concealing from them the fact that they should have a say in it. Brace yourselves. I'm a teacher who had a student with a deeply tragic past. I can't go into the details, but I will say these sorts of crimes are not being committed out in the open. They're very well hidden. You'll never see these children, and nobody is missing them. This poor boy couldn't read or write. One day he got a 100% on his spelling test. He asked me if I could call his mum and ask her to take him back and he'd be a good boy from now on. Trafficking is unfortunately all too common, but it's become a very hidden problem. In Latin America, look for maids who've been with a family since they were very young. In my country, they're called criadas. This is a form of servitude that closely resembles slavery and begins with a child, usually female, of a poor rural family being brought to live with a moderately wealthy urban family. The promise of a better future than what the parents could provide. These kids don't attend school and perform house chores all day and are paid in food and living quarters, and sometimes the promise of money that the bosses are holding for them. They grow up this way so that when they're adults, they're afraid to leave. They don't know any other way of life. The bosses don't often acknowledge anything wrong, and they often claim that the criada is grateful for having been given a better life. I sadly have to admit that this happened in my extended family. They were bosses to a criada who would be 75 years old today. Only after all of my aunts died and my cousins inherited the criada, they acknowledged the wrongdoing and arranged for her to have a pension and a house and to never have to work again and be treated as a respected member of the family. But it was too late. She only lived as a retired person for 5 years before passing away. She never learned to read, never had children or a husband or any type of significant other. If you're a university-aged student, be very cautious with foreign summer work arrangements in resort cities abroad. With foreign resort city summer work as the bait, university-aged students are promised a work visa, arranged legal work, round-trip travel, and lodging in a distant foreign country for an overall desirable resume-building experience. What's delivered is basically forcing worked hours far in excess of legal amounts, substandard pay, being housed in subpar conditions, and threatened withholding of summer-end return travel unless the person complies. The uni student's parents likely can't afford to send money to rescue their child. For an example, a Polish university student studying international business came to the US to work for a summer. What really happened was the student came here, got lodged in a single grubby motel room with 11 other similar-aged people, and was forced to work 12 hours every day rotating to various hotels doing contract housekeeping. She wasn't super confident with her English, absolutely didn't know how to alert authorities to her issue, and basically has no money. Parents didn't have the funds to wire her to get her home. This was a real case where this woman was rescued because she was cute, and a local older gentleman with nothing much else to do but talk with random cute girls asked her about her story. She spoke English well enough to tell her tale. The kind gentleman and his generous friends realized how illegal and messed up the arrangement was. They assisted this woman and her 2 friends by moving them in with a nice family and helped them get legit summer jobs, and raised funds to pay for flights for all 3 girls back to Poland. These men reported the sketchy arrangement and company to the local authorities and pulled enough strings to stop that small illegal operation. For those working in hotel services that contract a lot of foreign labor in areas like housekeeping or laundry, just keep an eye out on these folk. Maybe strike up a conversation to make sure they're okay. My wife used to teach piano in an affluent suburb, and one of her students had an elderly nana who was openly treated like dirt by everyone in the house. She began to suspect this was a case of trafficking or slavery, but shortly after she took a moment to talk to the old lady about her situation, the family got rid of the old lady and subsequently fired my wife from teaching their kid. This was in Monmouth County, New Jersey, around the year 2000. I believe the family was from India. The child she was teaching said Nana wasn't a grandmother, this is just what they called the au pair kind of person. I'm by no means someone who does this stuff for a living, just someone who had an experience. I lived in a very sketchy apartment complex in Phoenix. My wife and I generally keep to ourselves, so we didn't really have a problem. We at first noticed that there were constant visitors to our immediate neighbors. Their front door faced our front door. We figured maybe they were selling green herb or some stuff like that. You do you. We don't give a flying F as long as you don't bring trouble to us. Then we noticed that there was only men who'd show up every 15 to 20 minutes, stay for 15 to 45 minutes, and then leave. At this point, we're thinking, whatever, if a chick wants to work like that, we don't give a crap. Then we noticed the guy who seemed to be overseeing it all and the other girls in this apartment. They looked younger and never left the apartment unless escorted, and would only stick around for a couple of months before a new girl was brought in. When I say young, I mean they looked maybe 18. We only started realizing during quarantine, and we were home all day. The men would constantly knock on our door throughout the day and night, which is what caught our attention. Anyway, we called Phoenix Police Department. They knocked on the door and said they couldn't do anything without us providing photographic evidence. So we sat on our patio one day and discreetly started taking photos of all the men coming in. Call the cops again and provide evidence. They knock on the door again, a customer walks out and just runs for it. The girls all run for it too. Their boss comes by after and bangs on our door. We stayed at my dad's house for 2 weeks, while an investigator for these sorts of crimes surveyed the apartment. The guy in charge was moving everyone out, and the investigator was able to find their new spot. We moved the F out very shortly because we were afraid of some sort of revenge. This is long, but pay attention to the people surrounding where you live. No need to be a nosy person, but when we actually started paying attention, we saw what was going on very clearly. We were concerned because none of these girls spoke English, they weren't allowed out of the complex without an escort, and they seemed to be replaced constantly. There's an app you can download called Traffic Cam. Anytime you stay at a hotel, upload photos of your room. These photos are incorporated into an artificial intelligence algorithm that helps identify locations of trafficking victims via background details. Huh. You know, I read a lot of advice and life tips making these videos. This might be one of those ones that I actually follow. You know, just on the off chance that it helps someone one day. But unless you help catch someone, I'm not sure how you're meant to judge the effectiveness for your rating on the App Store though. If a guy comes into a tattoo shop with multiple women, either at once or separate trips, and makes the women get the same tattoo. This may be specific to the area of the US I live in, but the non-profit I worked for had us go to tattoo shops and give them pictures of known designs that traffickers make their victims get. Most shops were happy to take the pictures and post them in employee-only areas and train the employees on protocol when someone came in for their tattoo. One place was pretty awful because they didn't want to miss out on the money they make from doing these tattoos, which made us assume a lot of that went down there. My husband works with a home that deals with human trafficking. As has been said, most have to do with horrible work conditions, but there are some that are, well, a worse sort of trafficking, and he said that he finds most of the victims very quiet, and their eyes are always darting, constantly looking around for the next horrible thing or person to happen. He comes home and cries and tells me this job is the most rewarding thing he's ever done, but it's going to break his heart and his hope for humanity. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was young, I had neighbors from India who had a family servant. I was really young at the time, and I was friends with the family's children. Their maid cooked all of their meals, cleaned the house, and slept on the floor. What I remember is that the family would go to India every now and then, and I guess they promised her a better life in the US if she worked for them. As a result, they took her passport and she was pretty much confined to their home. No holiday, no weekend breaks. I don't even think she was paid or had a bank account set up. She was a very nice, sweet lady who made amazing curry. Anyways, she wasn't allowed to converse with anyone outside of the home. However, we all carpooled together after school, so she'd come to my mum's car to get the children, and she'd walk to my mum and even make my mum food. After a while, 2 years I'd say, my parents and my neighbors started to catch on. They made a plan to get her out and escape. She left and we took her to a family friend's place where she lived for a year. She'd go to the local Indian community center and I believe she met a man there. She eventually moved out of our family friend's home and I believe she got married. I really hope she's doing well now, and every now and then I think of her. Most human trafficking is not the movie kind. It's more the kind where an ethnic restaurant brings over a cook from their home country and they have to work unreasonable hours to pay back the trip. Or maybe it's a maid or a construction worker who works below minimum wage and can't have their passport back. So look for people who work long hours at sub-legal wages. There's a great story I read in which the author tells the story of Lola, who he eventually came to realize was his family's indentured servant. When his mother was a child in the Philippines, her mother died and a distant cousin named Lola came to live with her and her father to care for her in exchange for room and board. Apparently the deal was for life. Lola stayed with his mother through adulthood, after marriage, and then came to the United States with the family. Eventually, long staying past the legal lengths of her stay, she was kept hidden away, cooking, cleaning, and caring for the kids with no pay. She faced daily horrible treatment from his parents and didn't gain any kind of freedom until the mother died and Lola moved in with the author and his family. I think situations like that happen far more than people realize. One thing to know is that no trafficked kid looks the same. Here in the UK and across the world, people of all ages, genders, and cultures are subjected to human trafficking and exploitation. The most vulnerable ones, like the ones on the streets, are targeted and moved both within countries and across borders. Those trafficked here into the UK are often taken away from areas of poverty and made to go on dangerous journeys, travelling thousands of miles away from home. On arrival at their destination, some can be coerced into growing or cultivating illegal substances, benefit fraud, and forced begging. Others are forced into domestic servitude or worse, and a lot of the younger ones don't realize that what's happening to them is wrong. They might be too fearful to speak out as they've become reliant on their traffickers to feed and clothe them. They might also have been subjected to all sorts of horrible things or don't know where to turn for help. Those who've been trafficked from outside of the UK often speak little or no English, making them even more isolated and dependent on those exploiting them. An almost perfect scheme. There you go. I had a loved one pulled into the trafficking industry as an adult, so I can offer a couple of pointers for spotting adults who are being sold as unwilling working girls. First, missing shoes. It's hard to run away in a city barefoot. Blisters are a dead giveaway. Not carrying a cell phone, identification, or the purse or wallet to put it in. Their handlers like to hold these hostage to prohibit contact with the outside world and to make it difficult to purchase long-distance transportation. The manicure industry is notorious for this, so please think twice about patronizing salons you aren't familiar with. When prices are low, they're usually not paying workers. Often, nail salon working immigrants must pay a training fee of $100 or more to start working, and won't get paid for the first month or more. Finally, when bosses decide they're trained, they get paid, usually less than $3 per hour, on 66 hours or more per week. In addition, bosses are often harsh, controlling, and racist, making it difficult for anyone in the worker's situation to get out. I'd like to think that this wouldn't happen in my part of the world, but then again, we just had a whole big comment about the practice in the UK of all places. So I suppose you never know, do ya? Keep an eye out, folks. I work for a crisis center that provides services to help combat trafficking. Honestly, if you think something's off or smells fishy, it probably is. The perpetrators are so manipulative that the victim doesn't know what it is a majority of their time, or they've been groomed to deny it. A lot of what I see with adults is super unhealthy relationships, and they're told, if you do X, we'll give you Y. It's hardly ever them being taken somewhere, it's usually a partner or a family member. For instance, they want a better life, so if they do X, they'll get better stuff like clothes, education, and stuff. For kids, they're groomed to think that the person is better for them than their family, or they really did have a terrible situation with their family at home. It's frickin' sad. My wife is an attorney who works on the advocacy side of human exploitation, and in overhearing her meetings, the one line that struck me the most, and that I'd never thought of previously, is, "There's no such thing as a working girl below a certain age." The idea being, when you're that age, you're a victim, not a criminal. So to answer your question, the best way to spot it is to contextualize a legal activity and realize when someone's doing something because they're being forced to by someone, like a trafficker. The Covenant House in NOLA takes in kids who are subject to this, and at times subjected for years. The NFL player Ben Watson was involved in helping rescue kids. He did a very moving piece about the plight of some of those involuntary situations. You might want to look up the story. I was so dumbfounded at the extent and the effort people will exert to exploit these poor people. The story still haunts me, and I watched it years ago. I used to work with all sorts of people that were trafficked. First of all, assume anyone that looks underage is actually underage. If you see those images online, report them. The traffickers travel around a lot, keeping their victim on the move. Unlike what most people think, all of the clients I worked with, thousands of them, knew their trafficker. Either a friend of a friend, a relative, a step-family member, or a person they met online. So, check who your kids are talking to online on any platform. They also stake out places like group and foster homes. Honestly, some of you can help out by paying adults for your smut and adult content instead of using poorly curated sites. Secondly, I worked with adults that had been trafficked to work in massage parlors. They'd be brought in from various countries, including China and Vietnam, then have their passports taken. One of our clients lost their life to the traffickers. Finally, there are people in sweatshops, restaurants, and places like that. There have been numerous high-profile cases here in the Bay Area, including one by my house. I don't have tons of tips, just a bit of education. I volunteer with an organization called Unbound Houston. Many of these comments are spot on. It's not outright abductions we need to be wary of, it's situations where a person isn't allowed to speak for themselves. In hospitals, doctors' offices, or any point-of-service industry like hair appointments or the like. Situations involving runaways or even teens who seem happy but don't really have control of their lives or choices. The overly affectionate young child, the overly shy or quiet kid, the overly aggressive teen. All of these can be warning signs of exploitation. Basically, if it feels off, investigate. If you think you can't or don't have the ways to investigate, report it. The worst thing about human trafficking is the human indifference to it. Here's the International Rescue Committee trafficking information. Hotels and resort industries. Scottsdale, Arizona has many hotels and resorts. Resorts hire through third-party agencies. Employees, largely from the Philippines, end up being work trafficked. Hotels and resorts have plausible deniability. The Southeast Asia commercial fishing community. Men get hired onto boats unbeknownst that they won't be paid fair wages and have become unpaid, exploited labor. Large fishing companies, like the ones we see in the freezer at our grocery store, can plead plausible deniability as well. And why I boycott Wendy's. The IRC asked the fast food industry to not buy their tomatoes from suppliers with human trafficking violations. McDonald's agreed, along with a few others. Wendy's, however, chose to leave their current supplier and began doing business with a supplier that had even worse work conditions and violations. The average age for entry is 13. Watch what you and your kiddos do on the internet. Predators are charming. You need to teach family danger versus stranger danger. And teach kiddos the proper names for their private parts. Teach body autonomy. I can't emphasize enough that victims almost always know who did this to them. As a truck driver, truck stops are pretty popular locations. I haven't seen anything in person that I was aware of, but our company trained us to keep an eye out, and we run Truckers Against Trafficking stickers on our trucks. Besides the actual workers you see there, forced or consensual, at a truck stop, these stops are hotspots for transferring humans, food, and drink for traffickers. There's so many people and vehicles going in and out that it's a rather easy place for them. The signs are the same as everything else mentioned today, but this is a spot to keep an eye out for if you stumble across a Pilot or Flying J for fuel and breakfast one day. People that go to the ER or urgent care, likely rare for these folks, with a person who won't leave their side and speaks on their behalf. Could be a parent or translator, could also not be. There was some news article about it a few years ago at some place in Michigan, I want to say. I don't work for any organization that fights this, but I have one tip for you all. If a kid you don't know calls you mum, dad, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, or anything, you play along. They are likely in a dangerous situation and need help. Burglars. What are the best ways to keep you out of our houses? If you're in a very student-y area of UK cities, when you order a taxi, get it from a slightly different address, like a block of flats with lots of lights on, or a house you know has no one living in it. And be waiting outside, or better yet, get it from outside a supermarket or pub. In my city, certain cab drivers are in cahoots with burglars and let them know when a house is empty for most of the night, because the students are out clubbing, even if they leave a light on or something. I live in Liverpool, for everyone asking, which has a lot of break-ins on every road in the student area. And get your frickin' stuff insured. Landlord insurance generally covers the building, but not your possessions. Get an alarm system and use the stickers and signs saying that you have one. I'm more likely to skip a house with an alarm system. Don't make it easy for me. Lock your doors, close your windows, and most importantly, lock them. 95% of the houses I've been in, I just walked through the door or climbed through an open window. Don't leave tools laying around that's going to make my job easier. Ladders, saws, drills, sledgehammers, putty knives. All of these make it easier for me to get into your house. Contrary to popular belief, most dogs aren't a problem. Unless they've been trained to be dog guards, it doesn't take much to make one friendly. And don't advertise. If you just bought an expensive piece of electronic equipment or jewelry or tools, don't brag about it in public, don't leave the trash in sight, and don't post about it on Facebook. Use security hedges under your windows. If your house has rose bushes and your neighbors don't, I'm more likely to try their house first. If it's irreplaceable, don't leave it out in the open. Get a safe for stuff like that, and make sure you bolt it down. I'll happily take a safe with me and open it later. Don't live in a nice neighborhood. When I'm looking to steal, I don't go to the poor neighborhoods. I go to the subdivisions and wealthier areas. Don't assume I'm going to wait until it's dark to rob a place. Between 9 a.m. and noon are the best times to hit. Most everyone's gone to work, and those who aren't are running errands or sleeping. That being said, invest in motion sensor lights. If someone's outside your house at night, this can help. Finally, be suspicious and alert. Is there someone new walking your neighborhood that doesn't live there? Is someone getting yard care or pest control deliveries outside of what's normal for them? Does the same car keep cruising around at different times? You see, I'll study a neighborhood before I strike. Sometimes I'll spend upwards of a month. I'll note times people leave and arrive. I'll note when or if cops patrol certain areas and when. I'll pay attention to the delivery times, mailman times, and various other service people to see when they arrive, what they do, and how they're dressed. I'll watch to see who leaves windows open, who forgets to lock their doors, and so on. It doesn't take much time to make a hit and get away either. On average, I spend 8 minutes in a house, rarely more than that. Thank you to the actual burglars or people who claim to be burglars writing in. If you'd like to supplement your stories with credentials, feel free to leave your names, numbers, and photographs of any stolen items with our agents at your local police station for verification. Well, I don't steal any more, but I used to a lot. Alarm signs are the biggest deterrent. I'm going in through your front door. I'm not going to check windows or creep into your backyard or any sketchy stuff like that. The neighbors calling the cops is really the only danger. I dress nicely in a collared shirt and slacks. I'm white and clean-cut and fairly good-looking, a bit like a police officer. Your dog is useless. There's too much on the line to worry about, Fido. I've never been attacked by a dog, but if I was… No, I wouldn't want to hurt your dog, but yes, I would have if it attacked me. If you have an 8-foot-tall, fire-breathing dog, then yes, it probably is a good deterrent. Make sure your dog's fire-breathing is on point because none of us wants your dog to get hurt. I look for houses with the least viewpoints from the neighbors. Having an open front porch is your best defense. You should park in your garage. Parking in front of the garage is a telltale sign that there's likely no other car moving in and out of the garage, and the driver is likely at work. I can tell because of the discoloration. Pick up your newspapers. Stop your mail and newspaper if you're leaving town. If I pop the door and an alarm goes off, I'll probably leave. Make friends with your neighbors so they know who should be at your house. Going in and someone being home is terrifying. I don't want to hurt anybody and I certainly don't want to get shot. Also, the risk for getting caught just went from 3 years to 25. I will run screaming from the frailest old lady. Again, this isn't me anymore, but perhaps it gives you some insight. Stay safe. I see some guys in here saying to have a robust door. I've never been stopped by a door. It's very easy to kick one in and I would carry a flat bar. A solid core door with heavily reinforced framing might work? Spend big if you want this to be a viable defense, because it likely isn't. You could place a sticker in the window that reads, "Premises protected by Radio Shack." That sign really says that you have nothing worth stealing. If anybody tried to steal my 8-track player, I would try and knock them out with my VCR, and if that didn't work, I'd throw my Walkman at them. These answers come from a post titled "Burglars of Reddit." We really are a diverse community, aren't we? Don't post on Facebook that you're not home and how long you'll be out. To elaborate on this, don't post vacation photos to your social media until you're back home. But my coworkers need to see them immediately for the full effect of jealous rage. This one's always confused me. My Facebook posts are set to friends only. I trust my friends. I keep having relatives send me Facebook messages berating me for saying that I'm going to the movies because someone's going to rob me. No, they're not. I spent 1.5 years in prison after being convicted of multiple residential burglaries. I was caught after a mailman called 911 after seeing me go through a window. I had a pretty good run of burglaries from 2007 to 8, and I haven't done any in 7 years, so technology and times have changed since my spree, but here's how I picked my houses. First, I'd generally only go in the daytime during the week. The idea was for the adults to be at work and the kids be at school. 2, I'd try and find a corner house because it would have at least one side with no neighbors. 3, I went in middle-class neighborhoods close to a community college. I live in a large US city and needed an excuse to be in my late 20s walking around with a backpack. I'd stand out too much in wealthy neighborhoods, and poorer neighborhoods often have bars on windows because they expect to be robbed. Middle-class people seem to be careless. I often went in through an unlocked back door. Interestingly enough, I never went in through a front door. I'd always go to the backside because any fences would provide coverage. 4, people think a large dog would be a good deterrent, but I generally avoided those annoying small yapping dogs that never shut up. 5, I often went through a bedroom window, whether it was unlocked or not. I'm committing a major felony. I don't care about a broken window. 6, I usually went to a master bedroom because that's where the good stuff was. Things a homeowner can do besides armed guards around the clock? You can get a dog that doesn't like strangers. I don't care if it's big or small or threatening or friendly. As soon as one dog barks, the whole neighborhood starts barking and announcing a burglar's presence. Cameras. Inside and out. I knew a guy who was caught because he walked by someone's webcam inside their house and ended up on the news. Make the cameras visible. If I see a camera, I'm not just moving on to the next house, I'm going several streets away. A lock-back fence and restricted access to the backyard. That's generally where I broke into the houses from, so it makes sense. I should tell you, your beware of dog and security alarm signs and stickers are completely worthless. I once broke into a house through a doggy door. There was no dog home. 5, try not to have any stools or anything in the backyard. They make climbing through windows easier. You should keep your windows open. Burglars are extremely superstitious and believe that an open window is a sign of a bad omen? I'm sorry, but I have a Mac. It's funny, I was going to post a life pro tip about this subject. The life pro tip: if you're a burglar, talk to children. They'll tell you everything. Example, the other day we were at the store with my 5-year-old. A random woman smiled at her and says, "Hi, aren't you pretty? What's your name?" My daughter then proceeds to rattle off her full name, first, middle, and last, her mummy and daddy's names, what city she lives in, the fact that her older sister just got a new TV and a Nintendo Wii U, and that she's so excited because we're all going to be taking a trip to visit our family in California next month. All in the space of about 30 seconds. She just had so much stuff she was excited to share with her new friend that she couldn't stop talking. Maybe she secretly hates all of you and knew exactly what she was doing. This used to be a TV show, I believe it was called It Takes a Thief, but they had two ex-cons rob someone's house and then give that person tips on how they could be better protected. One time they had a cop volunteer to be robbed and he was shocked by how easily the robbers stole his stuff. What about moats? Why is nobody mentioning moats? To all of the many medieval dukes out there writing in with this exact complaint, there haven't been many replies, but speaking from experience, I can tell you that you're better off investing in guards than ditches filled with water. Moats might deter any enemy armies, but a thief will simply walk into a castle under the pretense of doing business alongside other tradesmen and common laborers. Lock your deadbolts. I can't tell you how easy it is to card a boot with the deadbolt unlocked. Might as well leave the door wide open. Confederate flag. It says not only do you own many weapons, but you really want an excuse to use them. If you hear me rattling around your house, you should hide in a closet and jump out to scare me. Rather than shoot you, I would run like a baby, i.e. making brown, waddling away for a few steps before I fall and bash my head on the coffee table. Undressed grandma. That'll scare off anyone. I was once visiting a female friend of mine who lived in a bit of a crappy neighborhood. At the time, I was working construction and swung by after work. I got to the house and took my size 12 work boots off and left them on the front porch. I tend to carry a pair of flip-flops in my bag and changed into those, then we hit a patio for some sunshine beers. I ended up getting my boots at her place and was in no rush to get them back as I had another pair. Now, I don't know how true this is, but she swears that having a pair of big work boots right by her front door made her safer. I'd pretty much forgotten about them as they were on their way out, but she left them right where they were. She had less craziness happening in her front yard, fewer strangers knocking on her door, and she wasn't broken into again at that place. Of course, it could have just been the smell. Cover everything in mayonnaise. I mean everything. The bed, the surfaces, the dog, yourself, everything. Burglars hate mayonnaise. To the legitimate burglars writing in here, I feel I need to tell you something. My brother and one of my friends, completely independently of each other, almost have a fantasy about shooting a burglar. They both have this romantic visualization of them being the good guy hero and burglars being the perfect example of a bad guy that's coming into their house to attack their family. They daydream and plan for this scenario. My brother even has his alarm siren turned off when he's home, so it only rings on his phone and won't scare an intruder away, like he's hunting or something. I just want you to know that these people are out there. If they break into your house, you're getting shot by a guy with a raging hero hard-on. And I frequently hear the same thing. You need to shoot to kill, because if you don't, they'll sue you. It's not worth it. Stay out of other people's houses. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This article from the Center for Problem-Oriented Policing is not written by a burglar, but it answers the question quite thoroughly. Burglars select targets based on a number of key factors, including the following: familiarity with the target and convenience of the location, like houses near a ready pool of offenders, houses near major thoroughfares, houses on the outskirts of the neighborhoods, houses previously burglarized, or houses near burglarized houses. Then occupancy, houses vacant for extended periods, houses routinely vacant during the day, houses of new residents, houses without dogs. Then there's visibility or surveillability, houses with cover, houses that are secluded, houses with poor lighting, houses on corners, houses with concealing architectural designs. Accessibility, houses easily entered through the side or back doors or windows, houses next to alleys. Vulnerability or security, houses with weakened entry points, houses whose residents are careless about security, houses with few or no security devices, and finally, potential rewards, houses displaying signs of wealth. This is a huge fear of mine, but what do burglars do with pets? I don't even care about my electronics, but don't you dare touch Mr. Mittens. 3 words. Rooftop Korean snipers. I've got a shoddy tripwire trap on every entrance. I've seen a couple of these supposed experts saying your dog is useless. That's bullcrap. If you have a little yappy dog, that makes sense. But my home was broken into several years ago during the middle of the day. I had a lab GSD mix. Like a lot of people would say, nicest dog ever, would probably kiss you to death, blah blah blah. And I got a call from the cops because someone driving by called the police after seeing a bloody man in a ripped shirt running away from our front door. When I got home, my front door area just inside my house had what looked like a little dried blood on the floor and door. The police said when they arrived, the dog was just laying there staring at the door. The police said he barked as they arrived, but quickly and easily calmed down. Nothing was taken, and only a small table by the door where we put our keys and stuff was knocked over. Long story short, the guy brought himself to the hospital and the cops picked him up as he was leaving. We didn't press charges for breaking in or anything, just let the police handle it, and never actually saw the guy, but the police officer told us his cheek was totally torn from the side of his mouth towards his jawline. We figured Pickles did enough justice and our lives would be easier to just move on. Yeah, there's been some back and forth on whether or not a dog is an issue, but this is our first account of an otherwise sweet pooch absolutely wrecking a wannabe thief's day. I guess it depends on the thief's animal handling skills and on the random quirks of personality that the doggo in question has. I grew up with a whole lot of thieving scumbags. Bank robbers, carjackers, you name it. So here are my suggestions in no particular order. Get a big frickin' dog. Very few thieves want to deal with that. If they aren't specifically targeting your house, then they'll move on to the next one. For houses they are targeting, they'll leave poisoned food outside and keep an eye out for that. Don't use window air conditioners. This was by far the most common way to gain access by my friends. Kick in the AC and climb on in. If nothing of value is found, the AC could be taken in for scrap metal. Motion detecting lights. They're a minor annoyance, and they'll scare off the brainless junkies. Visible cameras. They can be fake, though they're so cheap you may as well just spring for real ones. Don't leave your garage door open. Thieves like to drive around nice neighborhoods looking for people who've left their garages open. They love a situation where someone might be mowing their backyard. Quickly hop out the car, run into the garage, grab as many tools as they can, and run. If they bought a truck, they'll be grabbing bigger stuff. You probably won't even notice or know what happened. Make it a royal pain in the butt to get into your backyard. A 10-foot fence would be nice. No one likes breaking in through the front door or front windows. Nobody likes scaling 10-foot fences either. This complements the get a big fricking dog concept. Don't keep your car keys on a hook next to the front door. Newer cars are impossible for an average thief to hotwire. Easy as heck to kick in your front door and snatch the keys straight off the hook though. And related to the above, don't answer the door for strangers. If thieves are casing out the neighborhood, they'll pretend to be magazine salesmen or Jehovah's Witnesses just to take a peek of what's inside, especially that hook for car keys. Once again, a big frickin' dog can help here. Get an alarm system. If you can't pony up for that, get the stickers and signage off eBay. Don't keep anything in your car, especially work trucks or vans. Heck, I even know of someone who robbed a cop car. Keep your vehicles empty. Locks don't matter. The lock on the back door of a work van can be popped out in 5 seconds with a slide, puller, and a screw. The locks on your house are frickin' useless as well. If you're really paranoid and have a good budget, steel door frame and a solid steel door. I don't have much of any other advice on that. Just don't trust locks. Lock those doors. Even though I don't think much of locks, don't leave your house unlocked either. Deadbolts on every exterior door. Keep your expensive stuff out of sight. Your 70-inch flat screen should not be visible from the street. Your MacBook Pro shouldn't be kept right in front of your first-floor office window. Don't invite strangers over. Hosting an open invitation kegger is a terrible idea. If a thief shows up, they're either stealing something right then and there or they're casing the joint to come back later. If you have a safe, use it. It's utterly stupid how many people who have them just leave them open all the time because it's annoying. If you have firearms, try to keep that information to yourself. There's a whole subset of thieves dedicated to scouting out weapon owners and robbing them when they're not home. Don't post your entire social life publicly on social media. The people scouting out robberies aren't always across the street in a sketchy van. They're just following you on Facebook, Twitter, Foursquare, and Instagram. Keep anything that's really expensive in a bank security box. If your grandmother passed on a $50K diamond ring to you, don't keep it in your jewelry box. Don't do illegal stuff. The houses of substance dealers are robbed on a constant basis because the thieves know the cops won't get called, and the propensity for those victims to have expensive jewelry and electronics as collateral. Stay on the up and a lot of trouble will avoid you. Leave the TV and lights on when you're not home. Not only does it give the impression of someone being home, it will also entertain and comfort your big frickin' dog. If you're in an apartment, do whatever you can to add more locks, if possible according to your lease. Alarm system, cameras, all that stuff. There are lots of shady maintenance men and landlords out there. Lock your patio door even if you live on the 10th floor. Scaling the sides of buildings is actually pretty frickin' easy. If you're prohibited from owning a big frickin' dog, a little annoying yip-yapping ankle-biting dog can do something. Cats are fricking useless. Keep the flaunting to a minimum. If you have an expensive vehicle, at least try to keep it in a garage. If you have lots of expensive tools, don't fly a snap-on banner outside your garage. Don't put up a "This house is protected by Smith & Wesson" sign. Read up and be aware of how most popular scams work. Water meter scams, fence salesman scams, etc. Most of the time, someone will be distracting you somehow while their accomplice sneaks into your home. Just don't talk to strangers and you'll avoid all of them. Junkies love to rob the elderly. Medications and jewelry. Your broke college butt is probably safe, but please make sure your grandmother is all set. Don't leave an extra key under your doormat or under a rock or in your mailbox or on top of the doorframe. None of those. Also worth discussing are what to do when a burglar is in your house. You should get the F out. Your PlayStation is not worth getting shanked over. You will most likely lose any fights you start, so don't do that. Call the cops. Don't count on them to save you, but do it anyways. At the very least, you'll most likely have to file a police report anyways for an insurance claim. The chambering of a shotty generally scares the crap out of thieves. Real thieves will get the frick out of there if they think someone has a weapon. Junkies, though, might be too messed up to notice. Or they might have their own and not care. Still best to get the F out. If there is no way to avoid an encounter with the robber, get undressed. Not down to your undies, I mean 100% starkers. Get crazy. Yell things. This is not advised for attractive women, but for the average male on the internet, that's a viable deterrent for anyone. Your thief almost certainly has a specific game plan in mind. They know how they're going in, where they plan to go, what they plan to take, where they plan to exit, and how they plan to leave. Anything that can be done that will majorly disrupt their plan will generally make them leave ASAP. Mace. You can't legally procure mace. Sporting goods stores can carry bear spray. If you can't get that either for some reason, wasp or hornet spray. Again, I really can't stress this enough. Goal number 1 is to get the F out. Don't bring wasp spray to a firefight. If you have your keys on you, set off your car alarm. And lastly, just some general advice. Follow your local news and police reports vigorously. You should be able to get a feel for the kinds of crime happening in your area, and you can figure out a game plan based on that. Personally, my area is high crime, but it's all smash and grab type thefts. While my vehicle has been robbed 3 times in the past year, I have zero concern whatsoever that I'll be the victim of an armed home invasion. It's just not the style of the area. If you have a choice, try to live in a moderately populated area near a police station. Living at the end of an isolated cul-de-sac is going to be a lot easier for a thief to get into without being noticed than a townhouse in a 100-unit property. Be friendly with your neighbors to the point where they'll recognize any sketchy activity. Keep your nose clean and don't associate yourself with sketchy characters. Crime begets crime. It's callous for me to say, but really 90% of the victims of crime that I know had it coming. Keep receipts for anything you paid more than $250 for, and keep them in a fireproof safe. If you do end up having to file an insurance claim, they're going to screw you over hardcore without any documentation. Be aware that for high-ticket items, they're required to be scheduled on your policy ahead of time. If you have a $15,000 home theater system or $20,000 in collectible Magic the Gathering cards, your insurance company needs to know about that ahead of time. Keep serial numbers and photos if possible of anything you care about. If your laptop gets stolen and you see it the next day in the pawn shop down the street, it won't mean anything unless you have that serial number already on file somewhere. Register all of your products with the manufacturer whenever possible. You will have one hell of a time dealing with an automotive theft claim if the thief used your car keys. Keep those safe. Make copies of all your important documents, including copies of all your credit cards. It'll be 100 times easier to cancel all of them if a thief gets them. Shred any important documents you're throwing out. I could write endlessly about identity theft. I'll save that for another day. Big fricking dog. Regularly back up your computer to some cloud-based service. Dropbox, Google Drive and stuff. If someone steals your laptop, it shouldn't mess up your life. Install some sort of tracking app on your computer and phone right now if you haven't already. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.